Three drunk men pin a widow to the floor of her dead husband's cabin, laughing as one tears at her dress. Elena Ward has nowhere left to run until a shadow fills the doorway. The stranger doesn't speak. He doesn't need to. His hand moves to his gun. His eyes promise death, and suddenly the men who came to collect a debt are scrambling for their lives. But when he lifts Elena from the dirt, she realizes the most dangerous thing in that room wasn't the violence. It was the way her heart recognized him as salvation. Stay with me until the end, and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. The Kansas wind had teeth that spring. It came across the prairie like a living thing, rattling the loose boards of the Ward homestead and carrying with it the smell of rain that would never fall. Elena Ward stood in the window of the cabin her husband had built 3 years ago, watching dust devils dance across land that had drunk too much blood and given back too little. She was 24 years old. She felt twice that. Behind her, the cabin was stripped nearly bare. The good furniture, what little there had been, was gone, sold to pay debts that kept multiplying like weeds. The table remained because no one wanted it, scarred and wobbly as it was. 2 chairs. A narrow bed in the corner. The stove her husband had been so proud of, cast iron and heavy, worthless to the men who'd already taken everything else. Thomas Ward had been dead 4 months. Pneumonia had filled his lungs during a February cold snap, and he drowned on dry land while Elena held his hand and prayed to a God who didn't seem to be listening. She'd buried him in the plot behind the house, next to the 2 babies they'd lost, and then she'd faced the arithmetic of his life. Debts. Nothing but debts. The land was mortgaged. The equipment he'd bought on credit was repossessed before his body was cold. The seed he'd purchased last fall on a promise of payment after harvest. Well, there would be no harvest now. The merchants in town had been patient at first, tipping their hats and murmuring condolences. But patience, Elena had learned, had a price too, and she couldn't pay it. The sound of horses brought her back to the present. 3 riders. She knew them by sight, Garrett Cole and his brothers, Lyle and Ben. They worked for Marcus Brennan, who owned the general store and half the debt paper in the county. They'd been here twice before, each visit a little harder than the last. The first time they'd been almost polite. The second time, Garrett had stood too close, and his smile had made her skin crawl. She knew why they were coming again, and she knew what they wanted. Her hand moved to the shotgun by the door, but it was a gesture without hope. The gun was empty. She'd sold the last of the shells 2 weeks ago to buy flour. The knock, when it came, wasn't really a knock at all. It was a pounding that shook the door in its frame. "Mrs. Ward!" Garrett's voice was cheerful in a way that made her stomach turn. "We know you're in there, darlin'. Time to settle accounts." Elena's fingers trembled as she lifted the latch. Better to face them now than have them break down the door. The 3 men filled her doorway like a wall of flesh and whiskey breath. Garrett was in front, hat pushed back, eyes already moving over her in a way that made her want to disappear into her own skin. Lyle and Ben flanked him, grinning like dogs who'd cornered a rabbit. "Mrs. Ward!" Garrett swept off his hat in a mockery of manners. "Lovely day, ain't it?" "I don't have any money, Mr. Cole." Elena kept her voice steady. "I've told you that." "Oh, we know." Garrett stepped inside without invitation, and his brothers followed. The cabin felt suddenly suffocating, too small, the walls pressing in. "That's why we're here to discuss alternative arrangements." "There are no arrangements to discuss." Elena backed toward the stove, trying to maintain distance. "I'll pay what I owe as soon as—" "As soon as what?" Lyle laughed, a sound like rocks in a barrel. "As soon as money falls from the sky? Lady, you're 4 months behind. You got no crop, no stock, no nothing. You're living in a shack on borrowed time. The debt was my husband's, and now it's yours." Garrett moved closer. She could smell the whiskey on him now, thick and sour. "That's how it works, sweetheart. You inherited everything he had, including what he owed. I'll find work. You'll what?" Ben circled to her other side, boxing her in. "There ain't no work for women like you. Not respectable work, anyway." The implication hung in the air like smoke. Elena's heart was a drum in her chest. "Get out of my house." "Your house?" Garrett laughed. "Honey, This ain't your house. This is Mr. Brennan's house. You're just keeping it warm. He reached out and his fingers brushed her arm. But we could work something out. You're a pretty thing, even half starved. We could talk to Mr. Brennan, tell him you're cooperative. He might be willing to extend your credit. Elena jerked away. Don't touch me. Oh, she's got spirit. Lyle grinned. I like that. Of course, you'd have to be real cooperative. Garrett's hand shot out and caught her wrist, yanking her forward. Real friendly-like. Let go of me. Elena tried to pull away, but his grip was iron. Ben moved behind her, blocking any escape. Panic flooded her veins, bright and chemical. Easy now. Garrett's voice dropped to something that might have been soothing if it wasn't dripping with menace. We're not unreasonable men. We just need to make sure you understand the situation. I understand perfectly. Elena's other hand fumbled behind her, searching for anything. A pan, a knife, anything. You're thieves and cowards. The slap came so fast she didn't see it. Garrett's palm cracked across her face, and the world tilted sideways. She hit the floor hard, tasting copper, her cheek exploding in hot pain. Through the ringing in her ears, she heard Lyle laughing. Should have been nicer, Mrs. Ward. Garrett crouched beside her, his hand tangling in her hair. Last chance, darling. You can make this easy, or you can make this hard. Either way, you're going to pay what's owed. Elena's vision blurred with tears of rage and terror. She opened her mouth to scream, to fight, to do something. Let her go. The voice came from the doorway, low, flat, carrying the weight of a promise. Everything stopped. Garrett's hand went still in her hair. Lyle and Ben turned, and Elena saw their faces change. Confusion first, then calculation. She twisted her head and looked. A man stood in the doorframe, silhouetted against the afternoon light. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a dark coat dusty from the trail. She couldn't see his face clearly, but she didn't need to. The stillness that radiated from him was louder than any shout. This ain't your business, friend. Garrett straightened slowly, his hand dropping to the gun at his hip. Private matter. Didn't look private. The stranger stepped inside, and Elena saw him clearly now. He was maybe 35, with hard planes written into every line of his face. His eyes were the gray of winter sky, and they didn't blink. Looked like 3 men cornering a woman. That's my business. You know who we work for? Ben tried to sound tough, but Elena heard the crack in his voice. Don't care. You should. Garrett's hand was definitely on his gun now. You should care a whole lot. The stranger's eyes shifted to Elena, still sprawled on the floor. Something flickered across his face, anger, but cold, controlled. Then his gaze moved back to Garrett. I'm going to count to 3, he said. Then I'm going to start breaking bones. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. You threatening us? Lyle's bluster was all surface now, thin as paper. 1. Now wait just 2. Garrett's hand closed around his gun, and everything happened at once. The stranger moved like lightning, covering the distance between them before Elena could draw breath. His fist caught Garrett in the solar plexus, doubling him over. Lyle lunged, and the stranger's elbow met his face with a crack that made Elena's teeth ache. Ben grabbed for his own weapon, but the stranger had already pivoted, and suddenly Ben was on his knees with his arm bent at an angle that made him scream. 10 seconds, maybe less. 3 men reduced to whimpering, bloody heaps. The stranger looked at them with something like disappointment. Get out. They scrambled. Garrett clutched his ribs, gasping. Lyle's nose was a fountain of red. Ben cradled his arm and sobbed. They stumbled over each other in their rush for the door, falling into the yard, tripping toward their horses. This ain't over! Garrett spat blood, his face purple with rage and humiliation. You hear me? This ain't... The stranger picked up Garrett's fallen hat and sailed it out the door. It hit Garrett in the chest. It is for today. They rode away, their threats dissolving into the wind. Silence filled the cabin like water. Elena tried to push herself up, but her arms were shaking too hard. The stranger turned, and for a moment she thought she saw something break in his expression, something human beneath the stone. You hurt? His voice was gentler now, but still rough, like he didn't use it much. Elena's throat closed. She wasn't. She wasn't anything. The terror that had been holding her together snapped, and suddenly she was crying, great gasping sobs that she couldn't control. The stranger hesitated, then knelt beside her. He didn't touch her, didn't try to pick her up or pat her shoulder or offer any of the empty comforts men usually did. He just waited, quiet as stone, until the storm passed. When she could breathe again, when the sobs had faded to hiccups, he spoke. "Can you stand?" Elena nodded. She could. She had to. She'd stood through worse. But when she tried, her legs betrayed her, buckling like rotten wood. The stranger caught her before she hit the floor again, his hands careful, impersonal. He lifted her as if she weighed nothing, and maybe she did, half-starved as she was. "Where are we going?" Her voice came out small, childlike. "Somewhere safe." He carried her outside. His horse waited in the yard, a big bay gelding with patient eyes. The stranger settled her in the saddle, then swung up behind her. His arm came around her waist, holding her secure, and she was too exhausted to be afraid. "My things, nothing here worth dying for." He was right. She knew he was right. The cabin held nothing but ghosts and debt. They rode. The sun was setting, painting the prairie in shades of amber and blood. Elena drifted in and out of consciousness, lulled by the horse's rhythm and the warmth of the man behind her. She should ask his name. She should ask where they were going. She should do something other than lean against his chest and let the world fade away. But she was so tired, tired of fighting, tired of being afraid, tired of being alone. The stranger's voice rumbled against her back. "Stay awake a while longer, not much farther." "Where?" The word was barely a whisper. "My place. Got a spare room. You can rest there." "Why?" It was the only question that mattered. Men didn't help women for nothing. She'd learned that lesson too many times. "What do you want?" The arm around her waist tightened fractionally, steadying her. Nothing. She wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to believe him so badly it hurt. "What's your name?" she asked instead. "Seth Carver." "I'm Elena. Elena Ward." "I know." That should have frightened her, but somehow it didn't. She closed her eyes and let herself drift, just for a moment, just until they got wherever they were going. When she woke, the sky was purple with dusk, and they were approaching a small ranch. Nothing fancy, a simple house with a covered porch, a barn that looked sound, a chicken coop, corrals holding a few horses. Smoke rose from the chimney, lamplight glowed in the windows. It looked like home. Seth Carver dismounted and lifted her down with the same careful impersonality. Her legs held this time, barely. He didn't comment on how she swayed. "Come on." The house was warm. That was the first thing she noticed, real warmth, from a stove that worked and wood that had been carefully stacked. The second thing she noticed was how clean it was. Not just tidy, but scrubbed, as if someone had been trying to wash away more than dirt. "Sit." Seth guided her to a chair at the kitchen table. "I'll make coffee." Elena sat because she didn't know what else to do. She watched him move around the kitchen, efficient, economical movements that spoke of long practice. He put the kettle on, then disappeared into another room. When he returned, he carried blankets and a bundle of cloth. "Spare rooms through there." He nodded to a door off the kitchen. "Bed's made up. You can stay as long as you need." "I can't pay you." "Didn't ask you to." "Then why?" "Because those men are going to come back." Seth's gray eyes met hers, and she saw the truth there. "They know where you live. They know you're alone. Next time, I might not be there." The simple honesty of it cut through her defenses like a knife. She looked away, blinking hard. "How did you—" She stopped, started again. "How did you happen to be there? Today?" Seth was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was careful. "I didn't happen to be there. I heard in town that Brennan's men were making rounds. Heard they'd been by your place twice already. Figured they'd try again. You came looking for me?" The thought was too large to process. "Someone needed to." The kettle whistled. Seth poured coffee, dark and strong, and set the cup in front of her. Elena wrapped her hands around it, feeling the warmth seep into her bones. "Why do you care?" The question came out before she could stop it. You don't know me. Seth leaned against the counter, his own cup in hand. My wife died 2 years ago. After, there were times I needed help. Couldn't ask for it. Pride, I guess. Or shame, but people helped anyway. Brought food. Looked after my daughter when I couldn't see straight for grief. Didn't ask why. Just did it. He took a sip of coffee. Figure I owe that forward. Elena felt something crack in her chest. You have a daughter? Rosie. She's 5. Seth's face softened fractionally. Staying with neighbors tonight. She'll be back tomorrow. She knows I'm here? She will. Elena looked down at her coffee. What will people say? A widow woman staying in a widower's house? Let them say what they want. Seth's voice was flat again, final. You're here to rest. That's all. But they both knew it wasn't that simple. Nothing ever was. Elena drank her coffee in silence, feeling warmth spread through her body for the first time in months. When the cup was empty, Seth showed her to the spare room. It was small but clean, with a narrow bed and a window that looked out over the prairie. The blankets smelled like soap and sunshine. Thank you, she whispered. Seth nodded once and closed the door behind him. Alone, Elena sank onto the bed. Her face still throbbed where Garrett had struck her. Her wrists ached from his grip. But she was safe. For the first time since Thomas died, she was safe. She didn't remember falling asleep. The next days passed in a strange, quiet dream. Elena woke late the first morning to find breakfast keeping warm on the stove. Eggs, toast, bacon that must have cost Seth more than he could easily spare. She ate alone, listening to the sounds of ranch work outside. When she ventured onto the porch, she saw Seth mending fence, his movements steady and sure. She didn't know how to thank him, didn't know what to say. So she did the only thing she knew how to do. She worked. She washed dishes, swept the porch, scrubbed the floors that were already clean. When Seth came in for lunch, he found fresh bread cooling on the counter and soup simmering on the stove. He looked at it, then at her, something unreadable crossing his face. Didn't need to do that. I know. They ate in silence, but it was a comfortable silence, the kind that didn't need filling. That afternoon, a wagon pulled up, and a little girl with dark braids and her father's gray eyes came running up the path. Rosie Carver stopped short when she saw Elena, suddenly shy. Rosie, this is Mrs. Ward, Seth said. She's staying with us for a while. You're pretty, Rosie said with the devastating honesty of children. Are you going to stay forever? Rosie, it's all right. Elena knelt down, bringing herself to the girl's level. I don't know how long I'm staying, sweetheart, but I'm very pleased to meet you. Rosie studied her with those serious gray eyes. My mama died. I know. I'm sorry. Did your mama die too? A long time ago, yes. Rosie nodded as if this explained everything. Papa says people who hurt can help each other. Are you hurt? Elena's throat closed. Yes, I am. Then you can stay. Rosie said it with absolute certainty, then skipped past her into the house. Elena rose slowly, finding Seth watching her with an expression she couldn't name. She's wonderful, Elena whispered. She's all I got. The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. That night, Elena made dinner. Nothing fancy, just stew and biscuits, but she put care into it, and when Seth and Rosie ate without speaking, focused on their plates, she knew she'd done something right. After, Rosie showed Elena her collection of pretty rocks, each one carefully labeled with crayon. They were just stones, but the girl handled them like treasures, and Elena felt her heart crack a little more. When bedtime came, Rosie kissed her father's cheek and started for her room. Then she stopped, turned, and came to Elena. Without a word, the little girl hugged her, quick and fierce, before running off. Seth stood. She doesn't usually. People make her nervous. She's been hurt too, Elena said softly. We both have. Their eyes met across the kitchen, and Elena felt something shift, like tectonic plates moving deep underground, slow and inevitable. The days blended together. Elena fell into a rhythm, cooking, cleaning, tending the garden that had been neglected since Seth's wife died. She didn't ask permission. She just did what needed doing, and Seth didn't stop her. Some mornings she woke to find wood already stacked by the stove, or water carried in from the well. They moved around each other like dancers learning a new pattern, careful not to step on each other's feet. Rosie began to bloom. The girl who had been quiet and careful started laughing more, started talking at dinner about the chickens and the clouds and everything and nothing. She followed Elena around the house, chattering constantly, and Elena led her, drinking in the sound of a child's voice like she was dying of thirst. At night, sometimes, Elena would hear Rosie crying. The first time she lay in bed, frozen, unsure if she had the right to help. Then she heard Seth's footsteps in the hall, his low voice murmuring comfort, and the crying would stop. The second time, Elena didn't wait. She rose and went to Rosie's door, knocking softly. "Come in," Seth's voice. She entered. Seth was sitting on the edge of Rosie's bed, the little girl clutched to his chest. His face was haggard. "Nightmares," he said quietly. "She gets them sometimes." "May I?" Elena gestured to the bed. Seth hesitated, then nodded. Elena sat on the other side. Rosie turned to her, tear-streaked and trembling, and Elena began to sing. It was an old song, something her own mother had sung when Elena was small, a folk melody about moonlight and meadows and everything being all right in the end. Her voice was soft and cracked from disuse, but it was enough. Rosie's trembling eased, her breathing slowed. By the time Elena reached the second verse, the girl was asleep, nestled against her. Elena looked up to find Seth watching her with an expression that made her breath catch. Not grateful, not surprised. Something deeper. Something that looked almost like recognition, as if he was seeing her, truly seeing her, for the first time. "Thank you," he whispered. Elena carefully laid Rosie down, tucking the blankets around her. When she turned to leave, Seth's hand caught her wrist, gentle, asking permission this time. She hasn't let anyone comfort her like that since her mother died. Elena looked at his hand on her wrist, at the calluses and scars that marked a life of hard work. "I didn't mean to overstep." "You didn't." His thumb brushed across her pulse point, so light she might have imagined it. Then he let go. "She needs you." The unspoken hung in the air. "What about you? What do you need?" But neither of them was ready to ask that question yet. Elena slipped back to her room, her wrist burning where he'd touched her. A week passed. Then two. Elena knew she should leave, should figure out what came next, should face the reality of her situation. But every morning she woke in that clean, warm room, and every evening she sat at that table with Seth and Rosie, and the future felt a little further away. She was in the garden one afternoon, pulling weeds from the vegetable plot, when the world tilted. One moment she was reaching for a stubborn root. The next she was on her hands and knees, the earth spinning, her stomach heaving. She tried to stand. Her legs wouldn't cooperate. The edges of her vision went gray. She heard Seth calling her name from far away. Then hands on her shoulders, lifting her, carrying her. The world swam in and out of focus. When she could see clearly again, she was on the couch in the front room, and Seth was pressing a cold cloth to her forehead. "What happened?" His voice was tight. "I don't know. Everything went sideways." "When did you last eat?" Elena thought. "This morning?" "What?" "Toast. I had toast." Seth swore, low and vicious. "Before that." Yesterday I didn't have much appetite." "Christ, Elena." He vanished into the kitchen, and she heard him banging around. When he returned, he had bread and cheese and an apple. "Eat. All of it." "I don't care if you're hungry. Eat." She ate. He watched her like a hawk, and when she was done, he took her hand. "Your skin and bones. When did you last have a proper meal?" Elena looked away. "Things were difficult. After Thomas died." "Difficult." Seth's jaw was tight. "You were starving." "I was surviving." "Barely." He stood abruptly, pacing. "You're staying. No arguments. You're staying until you're healthy again." "Seth, I'll sleep in the barn if it makes you feel better about propriety. Hell, I'll sleep in the chicken coop, but you're not leaving like this." Elena opened her mouth to argue, then closed it. She didn't have the strength. And truthfully, she didn't want to leave. This place, this house, these people. They'd become something she didn't have a name for yet. All right, she whispered, for a little while longer. Seth's shoulders dropped fractionally. Good. But that night, as Elena lay in bed listening to the wind, she felt something else. Something she'd been ignoring because she didn't want to believe it. A flutter. A queasiness that had nothing to do with hunger. No, it couldn't be. She counted back. 4 months since Thomas died. 4 months since... Oh, God. She pressed her hand to her stomach, feeling nothing, but knowing. Women knew. Deep down, in places that didn't need confirmation, women knew. She was pregnant. The secret sat in Elena's chest like a stone for 3 days. She moved through the house as if nothing had changed, but everything had changed. Every morning she woke feeling the flutter of nausea. Every evening she caught herself touching her stomach when no one was looking. Every moment she spent with Seth and Rosie felt stolen now, borrowed time she had no right to claim. She should tell him. She knew that. But every time she opened her mouth, the words died in her throat. How could she? How could she look at this man who had saved her, sheltered her, asked for nothing in return, and tell him she was carrying another man's child? That she wasn't just a burden? She was a scandal waiting to explode? On the 4th morning, she woke before dawn and couldn't fall back asleep. She rose quietly, padding into the kitchen in her nightgown and the shawl Seth had given her. The stove was already warm. Seth must have been up even earlier, feeding it before heading out to the barn. Elena started bread. It was something to do with her hands, something to quiet the thoughts that wouldn't stop circling. Knead, fold, turn, knead, fold, turn. The rhythm was soothing, mindless. She was so focused on the dough that she didn't hear Seth come in until he spoke. "You're up early." Elena jumped, nearly dropping the bread. Seth stood in the doorway, his coat dusty, his face shadowed with stubble. He looked tired. He always looked tired these days. "Couldn't sleep," she said. He moved to the stove, pouring himself coffee. "Me neither." They stood in the pre-dawn quiet, the only sounds the crackle of the fire and the distant call of a rooster. Elena went back to her bread, but she could feel Seth watching her. "Elena." She didn't look up. "Yes?" "Are you all right?" "Of course." The lie came easily, too easily. "You've been quiet last few days." "Have I?" "Yeah." He set down his coffee. "You have." Elena's hands stilled in the dough. She should tell him, right now, this moment, before her courage failed. She opened her mouth, and Rosie came running into the kitchen, her nightgown flying, her braids half undone. "Papa! Elena! I had a good dream! I dreamed we had a kitten!" The moment shattered. Seth lifted his daughter with a groan of mock effort, making her giggle. "A kitten, huh? And what would we do with a kitten?" "Love it," Rosie declared, as if the answer was obvious. Elena turned back to her bread, blinking hard. The moment was gone. She'd let it slip away like water through her fingers. That afternoon, Seth had to ride into town for supplies. Elena watched him saddle his horse, Rosie dancing around his feet, begging to go along. "Not this time, little bird," Seth said, ruffling her hair. "I need you to stay and help Elena." "But Papa..." "Rosie." His voice was firm but gentle. "Mind me now." Rosie's lower lip trembled, but she nodded. Seth's eyes found Elena's over his daughter's head. "I'll be back before dark," he said. "Lock the doors if anyone comes by." Elena's stomach went cold. "You think they'll come here?" "No." But the way he said it made her think he wasn't sure. "Just being careful." He rode out, and Elena stood on the porch with Rosie, watching until he was a speck on the horizon. The prairie stretched out forever, golden and empty, beautiful and terrifying in its vastness. "Elena?" Rosie tugged on her skirt. "Can we make cookies?" Elena looked down at the little girl's hopeful face and felt her heart crack. "Yes, sweetheart. We can make cookies." They spent the afternoon in the kitchen, flour everywhere. Rosie standing on a chair to help stir, chattering endlessly about everything and nothing. The child had Seth's eyes but her mother's smile, or so Elena imagined. Seth never talked about his wife, and Elena had learned not to ask. "What was your mama like?" Rosie asked suddenly, as if reading Elena's thoughts. Elena measured sugar carefully. She was kind. She sang a lot. She made the best apple pie in 3 counties. Is that where you learned to cook? Yes. Did she die when you were little? I was 16. Elena's throat tightened. Fever took her. Fast. Rosie was quiet for a moment, mixing the dough with serious concentration. Then, do you miss her? Every day. I miss my mama every day, too. Rosie looked up, her gray eyes too old for her face. Papa says that's okay, that missing people means we loved them. Elena had to turn away, busying herself with the oven. Your papa's right. Do you miss your husband? The question caught Elena off guard. She'd been expecting it eventually, but still. She turned back to Rosie, choosing her words carefully. I miss the man I thought he was, she said finally. But the man he actually was. No, sweetheart, I don't miss him. Rosie nodded as if this made perfect sense. Papa says some people aren't very good at being people. Was your husband like that? Yes. The truth was a relief. He was. They finished the cookies in companionable silence, and when they came out of the oven, golden and perfect, Rosie ate 3 before Elena could stop her. The little girl's delighted laughter filled the kitchen, and Elena felt something in her chest ease, just a fraction. But as the afternoon wore on and the shadows grew long, Elena's anxiety crept back. Seth should have been home by now. The sun was touching the horizon, painting everything red and gold, and still no sign of him on the road. Where's Papa? Rosie pressed her nose to the window, her breath fogging the glass. He'll be here soon. Elena tried to sound confident, but another hour passed and darkness fell, and still Seth didn't come. Elena fed Rosie dinner, gave her a bath, put her to bed with promises that Papa would be there when she woke up. She didn't know if she was lying or not. She sat by Rosie's bedside, singing the old folk song until the girl's breathing evened out, and then she went to the kitchen and waited. The house was too quiet. Every creak of settling wood made her jump. Every gust of wind sounded like hoofbeats. She kept the rifle Seth had left within reach, even though she'd only fired a gun twice in her life and had never hit what she was aiming at. It was past midnight when she finally heard a horse in the yard. Elena grabbed the rifle and went to the window, her heart in her throat. But the silhouette was familiar. Seth's broad shoulders, his worn hat. Relief flooded through her so fast it made her dizzy. She had the door open before he reached the porch. Where were you? The words came out sharper than she'd intended. You said before dark. It's been hours. Seth stopped at the bottom of the steps, and in the lamplight spilling from the house, she saw his face, grim, drawn, furious. There was trouble in town, he said. Elena's grip tightened on the doorframe. What kind of trouble? The kind that involves you. Seth climbed the steps slowly, as if he was carrying a great weight. Elena, we need to talk. Her stomach dropped. About what? Inside. He moved past her, and she closed the door with trembling hands. Seth set his saddlebags on the table with a heavy thud, then turned to face her. In the better light, she could see he was furious, jaw tight, eyes hard as flint. Garrett Cole was in town today, Seth said. Him and his brothers. They were drinking at the saloon, telling anyone who'd listen about the widow woman who's staying at my place. His voice was flat, controlled, but Elena could hear the anger underneath. They had some real creative ideas about why you're here, what you're doing to earn your keep. Heat flooded Elena's face. Seth, I don't care what they say about me. I stopped caring about gossip when my wife died, and half the town looked at me like I'd killed her myself. His hands clenched at his sides. But they're calling you things that'll stick, things that'll follow you. I'll leave. The words came automatically. Tomorrow. That's not what I'm saying. Then what are you saying? Seth dragged a hand through his hair, and for the first time since she'd met him, he looked lost. I'm saying those men are getting bold. They've told the whole town you're here. They've made it clear they think you're available. And now every drunk with a grudge and $1 is going to think they can ride out here and... He stopped, his jaw working. I can't protect you and work the ranch and watch Rosie all at the same time. Elena wrapped her arms around herself. So I should go. No, The word was sharp. That's the last thing you should do. You go back out there alone, and they will find you. And next time, I won't be there. Then what do you want me to do? The question hung between them like a challenge. Seth looked at her for a long moment, and she saw something shift in his expression. A decision being made, a line being crossed. Stay, he said quietly. But we do this right. We give you a reason to be here that no one can question. Elena's heart was pounding. What kind of reason? You could work for me. Officially, I could pay you to keep house. Look after Rosie. He said it carefully, testing the words. That's respectable enough. Plenty of widowers hire help. And you think people will believe that's all it is? No. Seth's honesty was brutal, but it gives us cover, gives you some protection. Elena wanted to believe it could be that simple, but she knew better. She knew how people talked, how rumors spread like wildfire, and she knew the secret she was carrying would make everything so much worse. Tell him. Tell him now. But once again, the words wouldn't come. All right, she whispered, if you think it'll help. Seth nodded, some of the tension leaving his shoulders. I'll make it clear in town. Anyone has a problem with it, they can take it up with me. He moved past her toward his room, and Elena's hand shot out, catching his sleeve. He stopped, looking down at where she touched him. Why are you doing this? Her voice cracked. Why are you helping me? Seth was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was raw. My wife died in this house. I held her hand while she slipped away, and I couldn't do anything to stop it, couldn't save her, couldn't even ease the pain. He looked at Elena, and the grief in his eyes was a living thing. You came here broken and scared, and for the first time in 2 years, I could actually help someone, could actually do something that mattered. His jaw tightened. I'm not going to stop now. Elena's eyes burned. I'm not her. I can't be. I'm not asking you to be. Seth's hand covered hers where it gripped his sleeve. I'm asking you to stay alive, that's all. Their eyes held, and Elena felt the weight of all the things she couldn't say pressing down on her chest. She nodded, not trusting her voice, and Seth squeezed her hand once before pulling away. He disappeared into his room, and Elena stood alone in the kitchen, one hand pressed to her stomach, the other still warm from his touch. She couldn't tell him, not now, not when he'd just fought for her reputation in town, not when he'd just offered her a lifeline. The truth would ruin everything, would turn his kindness into obligation, would burden him with a responsibility he never asked for. She would leave before it became obvious. She would figure something out. She had time. But that night, as she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, she knew she was lying to herself. Time was the one thing she didn't have. The next week passed in a strange tension. Seth went about his work with grim determination, and Elena threw herself into the house with matching intensity. If this was to be her job, then by God, she would earn her keep. She scrubbed floors until they gleamed. She mended every piece of clothing that had a hole. She cooked meals that stretched the supplies Seth had brought back from town, making sure Rosie and Seth ate well, even if she pushed food around her own plate. Rosie sensed something was wrong. Children always did. She became clingy, following Elena from room to room, asking questions that had no good answers. Are you sad? Rosie asked one afternoon as they folded laundry together. A little, Elena admitted. Why? Sometimes grown-ups are just sad, sweetheart. It's not your fault. Mama was sad before she died. Rosie's voice was small. Papa thought I didn't know, but I did. She cried at night. Elena's hands stilled on the sheet she was folding. I'm sure your mama loved you very much. She did. Rosie looked up, her eyes fierce. And I love you, so you can't be sad forever, okay? You have to be happy again. The simple declaration broke something in Elena. She pulled Rosie into her arms, holding the little girl tight, and let herself cry. Rosie patted her back the way Elena had patted hers during nightmares, murmuring, it's okay, in a perfect echo of comfort given and returned. When Seth came in for supper, he found them on the floor together, Rosie showing Elena her rock collection for the 100th time, both of them red-eyed but calmer. His expression was unreadable, but something passed between him and Elena, a shared understanding that words would only complicate. That night, Rosie woke screaming. Elena was up and moving before she was fully awake, her bare feet flying across the cold floor. She burst into Rosie's room to find Seth already there, holding his daughter while she sobbed against his chest. "Monsters!" Rosie gasped. "There were monsters and they took you away and I couldn't find you." "I'm here." Seth's voice was rough. "I'm right here, little bird." But Rosie's sobs didn't ease. If anything, they grew worse, spiraling into the kind of panic that fed on itself. Seth looked up at Elena, helpless, and she understood. She sat on the bed and began to sing. The same folk song, the same melody her mother had sung to her. Seth's voice joined hers, rough and off-key, but earnest. Together they sang to the frightened child between them, their voices weaving together in the dark. Slowly, slowly, Rosie's breathing steadied. Her sobs faded to hiccups. Her grip on her father's shirt loosened. "Don't go," Rosie whispered, her eyes already closing. "Either of you, please don't go." "We're not going anywhere," Seth said. Elena wanted to protest, wanted to point out that she couldn't make that promise, that she would have to leave eventually, but Rosie was already asleep and Seth was looking at her over his daughter's head with an expression that made her throat close. "Stay," he said quietly, "just until she's deeper under." So Elena stayed. She sat on one side of the bed while Seth sat on the other, Rosie between them. Minutes passed. The house settled around them. The moon moved across the sky, casting shadows through the window. "She's dreaming about losing me," Seth said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "Has been since her mother died. The doctor says it's normal for children who've lost a parent. The fear that the other one will disappear too." "Have you thought about remarrying?" Elena asked, then immediately regretted it. "I'm sorry, that's not my business." "No, it's—" Seth rubbed his face tiredly. "I think about it sometimes, for Rosie's sake. She needs a mother. But the women in town—" He trailed off. "What about them?" "They look at me and see a ranch, a ready-made family, a way to secure their future." His jaw tightened. "They don't see me, and I won't build a marriage on that kind of calculation." Elena understood more than he knew. "Your wife. You loved her. With everything I had." The confession came easily in the dark. "Met her when I was 19. Married her at 20. She was my whole world." He looked down at Rosie, his hand smoothing her hair. "Then she got sick. Something in her lungs. She'd cough until she couldn't breathe. Doctors couldn't do anything. She just faded, like a candle burning down. I'm sorry. Everyone's sorry." There was no bitterness in it, just exhaustion. But sorry doesn't bring her back. Sorry doesn't help Rosie stop having nightmares. Sorry doesn't make the work any easier or the days any shorter. He looked up at Elena. "You know what does help?" "What?" "This. You being here. Rosie laughing again. The house feeling like a home instead of a tomb." His eyes were steady on hers. "That helps." Elena's heart was a wild thing in her chest. "Seth, I know you'll leave eventually." He cut her off gently. "I know this is temporary, but for however long you're here, you're helping, more than you know." The words should have comforted her. Instead, they made everything worse, because she knew what she was hiding, and she knew it would destroy this fragile piece they'd built. She slipped back to her room before she could do something foolish, like tell him the truth. But the universe, Elena was learning, had a way of forcing truths into the light, whether you wanted them there or not. It happened 2 mornings later. Elena was in the garden again, pulling weeds in the early morning coolness before the sun made the work unbearable. The nausea had been worse lately. She'd barely kept down her breakfast, and the dizzy spells were coming more frequently. She was being stupid, working herself too hard, but sitting still felt impossible. Sitting still meant thinking, and thinking meant facing the future she was trying so desperately to avoid. She reached for a stubborn root, and the world tilted. Not again, she thought, even as her vision grayed at the edges. Not now. But her body didn't care about timing. The earth rushed up to meet her, and then there was nothing but darkness. When she woke, she was on the couch again. But this time, Seth wasn't alone. Dr. Morrison stood beside him, a gray-haired man with kind eyes and careful hands. He was pressing his stethoscope to her chest, frowning in concentration. "There we are," he said when he noticed her eyes open. "Welcome back, Mrs. Ward." Elena tried to sit up. Seth's hand on her shoulder stopped her. "Easy," Seth said. His face was pale. "You fainted again. I sent for the doctor." Dr. Morrison sat back, folding his stethoscope. "Mr. Carver says you've been unwell for some time. Dizzy spells, nausea, fatigue." "I'm fine," Elena said automatically. "Just tired." Dr. Morrison's eyes were too knowing. "Mrs. Ward, when was your last monthly course?" The bottom dropped out of Elena's world. Seth stood abruptly. "I'll give you privacy." "No." Dr. Morrison's voice was gentle but firm. "Mr. Carver, I think you should stay." Seth froze. Elena's eyes flew to the doctor's face, pleading silently. "Don't. Please don't." But Dr. Morrison had been a doctor for 30 years, and he'd learned when to ignore his patients' pleas. "Mrs. Ward," he said calmly, "you're pregnant. About 3 months along, I'd estimate. Maybe 4. The words fell into the room like stones into a well, each one echoing in the terrible silence that followed. Seth turned slowly. His face was blank, carefully blank, in the way that meant every thought and feeling had been locked down tight. "Pregnant." "Yes." Dr. Morrison looked between them. "I gather this is unexpected news." Elena couldn't speak, couldn't move, couldn't do anything but watch Seth's face and wait for the moment he put it together, wait for the moment he realized what this meant. It didn't take long. "Your husband," Seth said, his voice flat. "The baby is your husband's." It wasn't a question. Elena nodded anyway, her throat closing. "Doctor." Morrison cleared his throat. "Well, this explains the fainting spells. You need rest, Mrs. Ward, proper food, less work. The pregnancy seems healthy, but you're underweight and clearly exhausted. If you don't take better care of yourself, you could lose the child." "I understand," Elena whispered. Dr. Morrison packed his bag, gave Seth some quiet instructions about her care, and showed himself out. The door closed behind him with a soft click that sounded like a gunshot. Seth stood with his back to her, one hand braced on the wall, his shoulders rigid. "Seth," Elena began, her voice breaking. "I didn't know how to tell you. I was going to leave before it became obvious. I swear. I never meant to—" "Stop." She stopped. "How long have you known?" Each word was measured, controlled. "A week, maybe less. I wasn't sure at first, but a week." He turned, and the look on his face made her flinch. Not anger, worse than anger, betrayal. "You've known for a week that you're carrying another man's child, and you didn't think I should know? When I've been telling the whole town you're working for me, when I've been fighting to protect your reputation, I couldn't what? Couldn't trust me?" His control was cracking now, emotion bleeding through. "After everything, after I brought you here, after you've been living under my roof, caring for my daughter, you couldn't trust me with the truth? I was trying to protect you." Elena was on her feet now, swaying but steady. "Do you know what this will do to you? To Rosie? A pregnant widow living in your house? People will destroy you. They'll say, 'I don't care what they'll say.'" The shout echoed in the small room. Seth stopped, visibly collecting himself. When he spoke again, his voice was low and fierce. "I don't care about gossip, but I do care about trust. And you didn't trust me." "You're right." Tears were streaming down Elena's face now. "You're absolutely right. I'm sorry. I'll pack my things. I'll leave today. You won't have to—" "Where will you go?" The question stopped her cold. "Where will you go?" Seth repeated, each word deliberate. "Back to that cabin where Garrett Cole and his brothers know exactly where to find you? To town, where every decent door will close in your face the minute they realize you're pregnant? Where, Elena? Where will you go?" She had no answer. They both knew it. Seth turned away, his hand dragging through his hair. "Damn it!" Elena stood there, trembling, waiting for the inevitable. He would tell her to leave anyway. He would hand her some money and point her toward the road and wash his hands of her. She'd been a fool to think this could end any other way, but Seth just stood there, staring out the window at the prairie, his shoulders rising and falling with harsh breaths. Minutes passed, an eternity. Finally, he spoke. The baby needs a father. Elena's breath caught. What? Every child needs a father, a name, protection. Seth's voice was rough. Without that, you're both… He stopped, started again. The world isn't kind to women in your situation, or to the children they bear. I know. Elena wrapped her arms around herself. I'll manage somehow. I always have. By starving? By fainting in gardens? By letting men like Garrett Cole hunt you? Seth turned to face her, and the look in his eyes was something she couldn't name. That's not managing. That's dying slowly. Then what are you suggesting? The words hung between them, heavy with possibility and impossibility in equal measure. Seth's jaw worked. I don't know yet, but there has to be something. He moved toward the door, then stopped. Rest. Like the doctor said, we'll figure this out. Seth? But he was already gone, the door closing quietly behind him. Elena sank back onto the couch, one hand pressed to her stomach where a child grew. A child whose father had left her with nothing but debts and bruises, a child who deserved better than the life she could give it alone. She closed her eyes and tried not to hope. Hope, she'd learned, was the cruelest thing of all. Seth didn't come back to the house until well after dark. Elena heard him in the barn, the rhythmic sound of an axe splitting wood long past the point when there was enough wood to split. She stood at the kitchen window, watching the lantern light spill from the barn doors, and knew he was working himself to exhaustion rather than face what waited inside. She couldn't blame him. Rosie had asked where Papa was during dinner, and Elena had said he was busy with ranch work. The lie sat bitter on her tongue, but what else could she say? Your father just found out I'm pregnant with another man's child, and now he's trying to figure out how to get rid of me without feeling like a monster. She put Rosie to bed with another song, another promise that everything would be all right. The little girl's faith in those promises broke Elena's heart. When she returned to the kitchen, Seth was finally there, washing his hands at the basin. His shirt was soaked with sweat despite the cool evening. His knuckles were raw. There's stew left, Elena said quietly. Still warm. Not hungry. You need to eat. Elena. He turned to face her, and the exhaustion in his eyes was profound. I can't. I need time to think. I know. I'll leave in the morning. I just need to… Stop saying that. Seth's voice was sharp. Stop acting like running is the only option. What other option is there? Elena spread her hands helplessly. You're a good man, Seth Carver, but you didn't sign up for this. You rescued a widow in trouble. You didn't rescue a pregnant widow who'll ruin your reputation and burden you with another man's child. No, I didn't. The brutal honesty made her flinch. But here we are. Silence stretched between them, thick and suffocating. Seth sat heavily at the table, his head in his hands. I keep thinking about what you said, about protecting me and Rosie. That's why you didn't tell me. Yes. And you were going to just disappear. Leave a note, maybe. Vanish before I figured it out. Elena's throat tightened. I couldn't see another way. Did you think about what would happen to you, to the baby? Seth looked up, his gray eyes fierce. Or did you just decide it was better for you to suffer alone than for me to have a choice in the matter? The question hit like a slap. That's not fair, isn't it? Seth stood, pacing. You made the decision for both of us. You decided I couldn't handle it, that I wouldn't want to help, that I was better off not knowing. You didn't trust me enough to even ask. Because I knew what you'd do. Elena's voice rose despite herself. I knew you'd try to help because that's who you are. You'd sacrifice yourself and Rosie out of some misguided sense of honor, and I won't let you destroy your life for mine. So you were just going to destroy yours instead. My life was already destroyed. The words ripped out of her. My husband left me with nothing but debt and shame. I'm a widow with no family, no money, no prospects, and now I'm pregnant with a child who'll be labeled a bastard the moment anyone does the math. What life am I destroying, Seth? There's nothing left to destroy. The admission hung in the air between them, raw and terrible. Seth's expression shifted, the anger draining away, replaced by something that looked almost like grief. Is that really what you think? That you're nothing? I'm realistic. You're wrong. Seth moved closer, his voice dropping. You came here broken and scared. And in 2 weeks, you've brought more life to this house than it's seen in 2 years. Rosie laughs now, really laughs. She sleeps through the night more often than not. She talks about you constantly. Elena said this. Elena showed me that. You've given her something I couldn't, something she needed desperately. Elena shook her head, tears spilling over. That's not enough. That's not... And me. Seth's voice was rough now. You've helped me too. I was drowning here, Elena. Drowning in grief and responsibility and loneliness so deep I couldn't see the bottom. Then you showed up, and suddenly I had a reason to get up that wasn't just duty. Suddenly the house felt like a home again, instead of a tomb full of ghosts. Don't. Elena backed away. Don't make this about... I'm not making it about anything except the truth. Seth's eyes held hers. You matter. Not because of what you do or what you can give, but because you're here. You exist. And the idea of you out there alone, struggling, scared, his jaw clenched. I can't stomach it. So what are you saying? Elena's voice broke. That I should stay, pregnant and unwed under your roof? Have you thought about what that means? The town will crucify you. They'll call me your whore. They'll say you're the father, that you seduced a grieving widow. They'll... Let them talk. Seth, I mean it. His voice was steel. Let them talk. Let them whisper and judge and condemn. I've lived through worse. And Rosie? What about her? Children are cruel. They'll torment her because of me. That stopped him. Elena saw the hit land, saw him think about his daughter facing down schoolyard taunts and pointed fingers. His hands clenched at his sides. Then we give them a different story, he said finally. Elena's heart stuttered. What? Seth met her eyes. We give them a story they can accept, one that protects you and the baby. There is no story that... Marriage. The word fell between them like a stone into still water, sending ripples in every direction. Elena stared at him. What did you say? Marriage. Seth's voice was steady now, as if he'd made a decision and was seeing it through. We tell people we've been courting quietly, that we wanted to be respectful, given that we're both widowed, but circumstances have accelerated things. We marry quickly, and when the baby comes early, well, first babies often do. Elena's mind reeled. You can't be serious. Why not? Because it's insane. Because you don't love me, I don't love you, and marriage without love is practical. Seth cut her off. My first marriage was for love, and it was beautiful, and it ended with me holding my wife's hand while she died too young. Love doesn't guarantee anything, Elena. But a marriage of convenience? That can work if both people are honest about what it is. And what is it? Elena's voice was barely a whisper. Protection. For you and the child. A name, a home, safety. That's what I can give. Seth's expression was carefully neutral. In return, you keep doing what you've already been doing. Care for Rosie. Run the house. Be a partner in this life, even if not in other ways. The careful phrasing made Elena's cheeks burn. A marriage in name only. If that's what you want? What I want? A wild laugh escaped her. Seth, you're offering to raise another man's child as your own, to tie yourself to a woman you barely know, to face down an entire town's worth of gossip and judgment. Why would you do that? Seth was quiet for a long moment, his eyes distant. When he spoke, his voice was rough with memory. When Sarah was dying, she made me promise something. She said, "Don't let the grief make you small. Don't let it close you off." I didn't understand what she meant until after she was gone, until I felt myself shrinking, becoming less, building walls so high nothing could touch me. He looked at Elena. You came here, and something in those walls cracked. I started feeling again, living again, and I realized Sarah wasn't asking me not to grieve. She was asking me not to stop being human. Elena's eyes burned. This isn't what she meant. She meant find love again someday. Find, maybe. Seth's smile was sad. But maybe she also meant do what's right, even when it's hard. Help people who need help. Don't turn away from life just because you're scared of losing again. He took a breath. This baby needs a father. You need protection. Rosie needs stability. I can provide all of that. It's not romantic, but it's real. And maybe that's enough. It's not fair to you. Let me decide what's fair to me. Elena pressed her hands to her face, trying to think through the chaos in her head. It was madness. Complete madness. But as she stood there in Seth Carver's kitchen, she couldn't see another path forward. Every other road led to ruin. For her, for the baby. Maybe for Rosie, too, if Elena's disappearance broke the little girl's heart. If we did this, she said slowly, lowering her hands, it would have to be clear. No expectations beyond what you've said. No complications. Agreed. And if you meet someone, someday, someone you actually want to, I won't. Seth's voice was firm. I told you I loved Sarah with everything I had. That doesn't come twice. This would be a practical arrangement, but I'd honor it. I'm not a man who breaks vows. Elena believed him. That was the terrifying part. She believed every word. The town won't accept it easily, she warned. They'll look for cracks in the story. Then we don't give them any. Seth moved closer. We present a united front. We act like a couple who's chosen each other. It doesn't have to be real, but it has to look real. Can you do that? Pretend? Something flickered in Seth's eyes, something she couldn't quite read. Can you? Elena thought about Thomas, about the years she'd spent pretending her marriage was something other than a slow suffocation. She'd gotten very good at wearing masks. Yes, she whispered. I can pretend. Then we have an agreement? It wasn't a proposal. There was no romance in it, no declaration of feeling. It was a business arrangement, negotiated in a kitchen by two people who'd been broken by life and were trying to find a way to survive. But Elena looked at this man who'd saved her twice now, once from Garrett Cole's violence and once from her own despair, and she knew she'd never get a better offer. Yes, she said. We have an agreement. Seth nodded once, sharp and final. I'll ride to town tomorrow, talk to the Reverend. We'll do this properly, small ceremony, nothing fancy. Just us and Rosie and whatever witnesses the Reverend requires. That fast? Faster we do this, the more believable it is. People will talk either way, but if we act like we have nothing to hide, it'll die down quicker. He was right. Elena knew he was right, but the reality of it was crashing down on her now. In a matter of days, maybe a week, she would be Seth Carver's wife. She would wear his name, share his home, raise his daughter, and none of it would be real. I should tell Rosie, Seth said, before we make it public. She deserves to know first. What will you tell her? The truth, or a version of it. Seth's expression softened. That you and I have decided to be a family. That you'll be her mother, if she'll have you. That there's a baby coming who will be her brother or sister. She might not understand. She'll understand enough. Seth moved toward his daughter's room, then paused. Elena? Thank you. For what? For trusting me now. I know it's late, but thank you. He disappeared into the hallway, and Elena sank into a chair, her legs finally giving out. Her hand went to her stomach, to the life growing there that would never know its real father, a man who'd been cruel when he drank and indifferent when he was sober. Maybe that was a mercy. Maybe this child deserved better than the truth. She heard Seth's low voice in Rosie's room, heard the little girl's sleepy confusion turn to excitement. Elena's going to be my mama? Really, truly? Really, truly. And we'll have a baby? Yes. Can I help take care of it? Of course you can, little bird. Rosie's delighted laugh drifted through the house, and Elena felt something crack in her chest. This little girl, who'd lost her mother too young, was getting a chance at having one again. Even if it was built on necessity rather than love, even if the foundation was shaky, Rosie would have a mother. That had to count for something. Elena was still sitting there when Seth returned. He looked exhausted, but lighter somehow, as if telling Rosie had made it real in a way the conversation with Elena hadn't. She's thrilled, he said. Wants to know if she can call you Mama or if she should keep calling you Elena. Elena's throat closed. Whatever she's comfortable with. I told her to ask you herself tomorrow. Seth poured himself coffee, though it was far too late for it. She also wants to make a flower crown for the wedding. Despite everything, Elena smiled. That sounds lovely. They sat in silence, sipping coffee neither of them wanted. Two people who just agreed to tie their lives together without a single word about love or desire or any of the things marriages were supposed to be built on. We should sleep, Seth said finally. Tomorrow's going to be long. Elena nodded and rose. At the door to her room, she paused. Seth, I'll try to be a good wife, in the ways that matter. I know you will. She closed the door and leaned against it, her heart racing. In a week she would be married again. The thought should have terrified her. Instead, all she felt was a strange, cautious relief, like a person who'd been drowning finally touching solid ground. Seth rode out at dawn. Elena watched from the kitchen window as he saddled his horse, his movements quick and efficient. He didn't look back at the house before he left, and she wondered what he was feeling. Regret? Resignation? Or just the same numb determination she felt? Rosie bounced into the kitchen like a sunbeam, already chattering about the wedding. Will you wear white? Can I pick flowers? Will there be cake? I don't have a white dress, sweetheart, Elena said gently, and it'll be a very small ceremony, just us and your father and the Reverend. That's okay. You're pretty in anything. Rosie grabbed Elena's hand. Are you excited? Excited. Such a simple word for such a complicated feeling. Yes, Elena lied. I'm excited. They spent the morning in the garden, Rosie helping Elena pull weeds while chattering endlessly about babies and families and all the things they would do together. The little girl's joy was infectious, and despite the weight of what was coming, Elena found herself smiling. Will the baby look like you or Papa? Rosie asked, holding up a particularly large weed triumphantly. Elena's smile faltered. I don't know, sweetheart. Babies are surprising that way. I hope it looks like you. You're so pretty. The innocent compliment made Elena's eyes sting. She pulled Rosie into a hug, breathing in the little girl's scent of sunshine and dirt and innocence. You're pretty too, so very pretty. Mama used to say that. Rosie's voice was muffled against Elena's shoulder. I miss her. Is it okay to miss her even though you're going to be my new mama? Of course it is. Elena pulled back, smoothing Rosie's hair. You should always remember her. She loved you so much, and that love doesn't go away just because she's gone. I'm not trying to replace her, Rosie. I could never do that. I'm just here. A different kind of mother, maybe, but still yours. Rosie nodded seriously. Papa said the same thing, that you're not replacing Mama. You're adding to our family. Your papa's a smart man. The smartest, Rosie agreed. That's why he picked you. If only it were that simple, Elena thought. If only any of this were simple. Seth returned in the late afternoon, his face carefully neutral. He dismounted and came straight to Elena, who was hanging laundry while Rosie chased butterflies in the yard. It's done, he said quietly. Reverend Blake will marry us Saturday afternoon, 3 days from now. Elena's hand stilled on the sheet she was pinning. That's fast? He had concerns about the speed, the appearance of it. Seth's jaw tightened. I told him we were both adults who'd been married before, that we knew what we were doing, and that it wasn't his place to judge. He agreed, but he wasn't happy about it. Will he keep it quiet until after? He'll try. But you know how these things go. By tomorrow morning, half the town will know. Elena nodded. She'd expected as much. Did you tell anyone else? Picked up a few supplies. Made it clear to the store owner that I was buying for my soon-to-be wife. Seth's mouth twisted. Figured if we're going to do this, might as well start spreading the word now. Give people time to adjust before the ceremony. What did he say? Nothing to my face, but I could see the calculations in his eyes. Wondering about the timing, about how long you've really been here. Seth looked at her, his gray eyes steady. This is going to get ugly before it gets better. You need to be prepared for that. I've been through ugly before, Elena said softly. I can handle it. I know you can, but you shouldn't have to. The words, simple and sincere, made Elena's throat tight. She turned back to the laundry, needing something to do with her hands. 3 days. That's not much time to prepare. Don't need much. Just need you and me, and a yes. Seth hesitated, then reached into his pocket. I did get this, though. He held out his hand. In his palm lay a simple gold band. Nothing fancy, no stones, just plain metal worn smooth with age. It was Sarah's, Seth said quietly. I know that's not ideal, but it's all I have. If you'd rather I bought something new... No. Elena's fingers trembled as she reached for it. It's perfect. And it was. There was something right about wearing the ring of the woman who'd loved Seth first, who'd given him Rosie, who'd made him promise not to let grief make him small. It felt like a blessing, or maybe a forgiveness Elena hadn't earned yet. She'd want it used, Seth said. She'd want it to mean something again. Elena slipped the ring onto her finger. It was slightly too large, spinning loose on her thin finger. Seth frowned. I can take it to the jeweler, have it sized. Leave it. Elena closed her hand around it. I'll grow into it. The double meaning hung between them, the ring, the marriage, the life they were choosing. That night, after Rosie was asleep, Elena and Seth sat at the table making plans. They needed a story that would hold up to scrutiny, so they built one carefully, like architects designing a house. We'll say you came here as my housekeeper initially, Seth said, making notes on a piece of paper. Respectable, proper. But over time we developed feelings. Given our circumstances, both widowed, both lonely, it seemed natural. And the baby? Seth's pencil paused. We tell the truth about the timing, that it's your late husband's child, but we make it clear that I'm choosing to raise it as mine, that it's not a burden, but a blessing, a chance to build a family. People will still count months. Let them count. Seth's voice was hard. By the time the baby comes, we'll have been married long enough that most people will choose to believe it's mine. And the ones who don't, their opinion doesn't matter. Elena wanted to believe that. What about Garrett Cole and his brothers? They know when I left my cabin. They know how pregnant I was, or wasn't. Seth's expression darkened. Garrett Cole's word isn't worth spit in this town. If he tries to make trouble, I'll handle it. How? However I have to. The promise in those words made Elena shiver. She'd seen Seth fight once, seen the cold efficiency with which he dealt with 3 men who'd meant her harm. She didn't doubt he'd do it again if necessary. I don't want you getting hurt because of me, she said. Then we'd better make this story airtight so there's nothing for him to use against us. They talked late into the night, refining details, anticipating questions. By the time they finished, Elena's head was spinning with their carefully constructed fiction, a fiction that contained just enough truth to be believable. The next 2 days passed in a blur. Word spread through the county like wildfire. Seth Carver was marrying the Ward widow. People rode out to the ranch under various pretenses, borrowing tools, returning dishes, checking on livestock, but really to catch a glimpse of Elena, to study her figure, to search for evidence of scandal. Elena met them all with quiet dignity, her hand resting on her stomach in a gesture that could be protective or could just be habit. She didn't hide the pregnancy, but she didn't flaunt it either. She simply existed and let people draw their own conclusions. Mrs. Henderson from the neighboring ranch was the boldest. She arrived Friday morning with a basket of preserves and a sharp eye. Heard congratulations are in order, she said, her gaze raking over Elena. Thank you, Elena said evenly. Would you like some coffee? I would. Mrs. Henderson settled herself at the kitchen table like she was planning to stay. Must have been quite the whirlwind courtship. You've only been here a few weeks. When you know, you know. Elena poured coffee with steady hands. Seth and I are both mature adults. We've both been married before. We know what we're looking for in a partner. And what's that? Elena met the woman's eyes. Companionship, partnership, someone to build a life with. She let her hand rest on her stomach. Someone who wants a family. Mrs. Henderson's eyes dropped to Elena's belly. That baby, it's my late husband's, Elena said calmly. Seth knows. He's choosing to raise the child as his own. We're very blessed. The woman's face flickered between disapproval and grudging respect. That's quite generous of him. Seth is a generous man. I'm very lucky. After Mrs. Henderson left, her curiosity partly satisfied but far from sated, Seth found Elena in the garden, pulling weeds with more force than necessary. You all right? He asked. Fine. Elena yanked out a particularly stubborn weed. Just preparing for tomorrow. Seth knelt beside her, his hand covering hers. Elena, look at me. She did. His gray eyes were serious. Tomorrow, we stand in front of that reverend and make vows. They might not be traditional vows, they might not be based on love, but they're still real, still binding. Once we do this, there's no taking it back. I know. Do you? Seth's grip tightened. Because I need to know you're sure. I need to know you're not just doing this because you think you have no other choice. I don't have another choice. That's not what I'm asking. Elena was quiet for a long moment, looking at this man who'd saved her life twice, who'd offered her safety when she had none, who was about to give her child a name and a future. I'm sure, she said finally. I'm scared, but I'm sure. Seth nodded slowly, then released her hand. Good. Because tomorrow you become my wife. And I take that seriously, even if the circumstances are unusual. He stood and walked away, leaving Elena alone in the garden with dirt under her nails and tears on her cheeks. That night she couldn't sleep. She lay in bed listening to the house settle around her, thinking about the morning to come. In a few hours, she would put on her best dress, the blue calico that was faded but clean, and ride into town with Seth and Rosie. She would stand before a reverend and promise to love, honor, and cherish a man she barely knew. She would become Elena Carver, and the woman she'd been, Elena Ward, Thomas's widow, the woman drowning in debt and fear, would cease to exist. It should have felt like death. Instead, it felt almost like being born. Just before dawn, Elena rose and went to the kitchen. She found Seth already there, staring into his coffee as if it held answers. Couldn't sleep either? She asked. No. He looked up at her, and something in his expression made her breath catch. Vulnerability, fear, hope, all tangled together. Elena, I need you to know something before we do this. Her heart hammered. What? If you have any doubts, any at all, you can walk away. I'll still help you figure something out. You won't be alone. Seth, I just need you to know that. Need you to know this is your choice. Elena crossed to him, her bare feet silent on the floor. She stopped close enough to feel the heat radiating from his body, close enough to see the exhaustion and determination written in every line of his face. I choose this, she said quietly. I choose you. Maybe not for the reasons people expect, but I'm choosing nonetheless. Seth searched her face as if looking for a lie. Whatever he saw there must have satisfied him, because he nodded once. Then let's get married. The chapel was small and plain, just 4 walls and a dozen pews and a simple wooden cross above the altar. Sunlight streamed through the windows, catching dust motes in golden shafts, and the air smelled of old wood and candle wax. Elena stood in the doorway holding Rosie's hand, her heart hammering so hard she could hear it in her ears. Seth was already there, standing at the front with Reverend Blake. He'd cleaned up, shaved, put on a dark suit that looked like it had been stored away for years, combed his hair back. He looked like a stranger, formal and distant, until he turned and saw her. Then his expression softened into something she recognized, and she could breathe again. You look beautiful, Rosie whispered, tugging on Elena's hand. The little girl wore her best dress, yellow with white flowers, and she'd woven a crown of prairie wildflowers that sat crooked on her dark braids. She'd made one for Elena, too, and it rested now on Elena's carefully pinned hair, the only adornment she had besides Sarah's ring. So do you, sweetheart, Elena whispered back. They walked down the short aisle together. There were no other guests, just the Reverend and his wife, Mrs. Blake, who sat in the front pew as witness and looked at Elena with a mix of curiosity and judgment that Elena had learned to ignore. This woman's opinion didn't matter. None of their opinions mattered. Only the vows she was about to make, and whether she could live with them afterward. Seth reached out his hand when she got close. Elena took it, and his fingers were warm and solid around hers, steady, real. "You ready?" he asked, so quietly only she could hear. Elena looked up at him, at this man who'd fought for her, sheltered her, offered her a future when she'd had none. "Yes," she said. "I'm ready." Reverend Blake cleared his throat. He was an older man with white hair and kind eyes that nevertheless held a sharp intelligence. Elena knew he'd agreed to this marriage despite his reservations, and she respected him for that. "Dearly beloved," he began, his voice carrying the weight of years of practice. "We are gathered here today to join Seth Carver and Elena Ward in holy matrimony. Marriage is not to be entered into lightly, but with reverence and commitment, as a sacred covenant before God and these witnesses." The words washed over Elena like a river. She'd heard them before, standing beside Thomas in a different church, in a different life. Then, she'd been 19 and foolish, believing in fairy tales and happy endings. Now she was older, harder, and she knew exactly what marriage could be: a prison or a partnership, depending on the people in it. "Seth," Reverend Blake said, "do you take Elena to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part?" Seth's grip on her hand tightened. "I do." "Elena, do you take Seth to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part?" Elena's throat was dry. This was it, the moment of no return. She could still walk away, could still refuse, could still choose the uncertain horror of being alone over the strange safety of this arrangement. But when she looked at Seth's face, at the determination and quiet hope there, when she felt Rosie squeeze her other hand in encouragement, she knew there was only one answer. "I do." Reverend Blake smiled, some of the tension leaving his shoulders. "The rings, please." Seth pulled Elena's ring from his pocket, Sarah's ring, worn smooth with love and time. He'd taken it to the jeweler yesterday after all, Elena realized. It would fit now. He slipped it onto her finger with careful reverence, and this time it sat snug and perfect, warm from his pocket. "With this ring, I thee wed," Seth said, his voice rough. Elena had nothing to give him in return. No ring, no token, nothing but her word. But Seth pulled a second ring from his pocket, a plain gold band that matched hers, and pressed it into her palm. She stared at it, confused. "Sarah gave it to me," Seth said quietly. "Seemed right that you should give it back." Understanding flooded through her. This was the other half of the set, the ring Sarah had placed on Seth's finger years ago. And now Elena would do the same, completing a circle that had been broken by death. Her hands trembled as she took Seth's left hand and slipped the ring on. It fit perfectly, settling into the groove it had worn before, and Seth's fingers closed around hers. "With this ring I thee wed," Elena whispered. "By the power vested in me," Reverend Blake said, "I now pronounce you husband and wife. Seth, you may kiss your bride." Elena's eyes flew to Seth's. They hadn't discussed this part, hadn't planned for it, but of course there would be a kiss. There was always a kiss at weddings. It was expected, traditional, necessary to seal the vows. Seth's hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing her cheekbone. He leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. Elena closed her eyes and let it happen. His lips touched hers, gentle and brief. It lasted perhaps 3 seconds, maybe less, a chaste, formal kiss that fulfilled the requirement without overstepping the boundaries they'd drawn. When he pulled back, his eyes searched hers, asking a question she didn't know how to answer. "Congratulations," Reverend Blake said warmly, breaking the moment. "May God bless your union." Mrs. Blake came forward with a smile that was more genuine than Elena had expected. "Welcome to the community, Mrs. Carver." Mrs. Carver. The name hit Elena like a physical blow. She was Elena Carver now, Mrs. Seth Carver, a wife again with all the weight and expectation that carried. Rosie was suddenly between them, hugging Elena's waist and Seth's leg simultaneously. "You're married! You're really truly married!" Seth lifted his daughter, settling her on his hip. "We really truly are, little bird." Can we go home now? I want to show Elena her present. Present? Elena's voice came out scratchy. I made you something, Rosie said proudly. A wedding present. Papa helped. Seth's ears went slightly red. We should sign the register first. They did, Elena's hand shaking so badly that her signature was barely legible. But there it was in black ink. Elena Carver, married this day to Seth Carver, witnessed by Reverend Blake and his wife. Legal, binding, real. The ride home was quiet. Rosie chattered from her perch behind Seth, but the adults said nothing, each lost in their own thoughts. Elena kept looking at the ring on her finger, turning it in the sunlight, watching it catch and gleam. It felt heavier than it should, as if it carried the weight of all the promises she'd just made. When they reached the ranch, Rosie jumped down and ran inside, calling over her shoulder, "Wait here! Don't come in yet!" Seth dismounted and helped Elena down, his hands careful on her waist. They stood there in the yard, married but uncertain, until Rosie's voice called out, "Okay, you can come in now." The house was transformed. Someone, Rosie with Seth's help, Elena realized, had strung wildflowers across the kitchen, tied them to the chairs, placed them in jars on the table. It was simple and sweet, and so earnest it made Elena's throat close. "Do you like it?" Rosie asked anxiously. "Papa said weddings should be special, so we made it special." "It's perfect," Elena managed. "Thank you, sweetheart." "And look!" Rosie ran to the table and picked up something wrapped in cloth. "This is from me and Papa." Elena unwrapped it with careful hands. Inside was a baby blanket, soft, cream-colored wool, hand-stitched with care. But it was what was embroidered on it that made Elena's breath catch. A single word, done in careful blue thread. Faith. "Papa says that's a good name for a baby," Rosie explained. "Because you had faith to come here, and Papa had faith to help you, and now we're a family because of faith." Elena looked at Seth over Rosie's head. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes held something that looked almost like tenderness. "It's beautiful," Elena whispered. "Thank you both." They had a simple meal. Stew Elena had made yesterday, bread, preserves. It should have felt awkward, this first meal as a married couple, but Rosie's presence made it easier. She kept up a steady stream of chatter about weddings and babies and all the things they would do as a family, and by the time they finished eating, some of the tension had eased. "Time for bed," Seth told Rosie when the sun began to set. "But it's a special day. Every day is going to be special now," Seth said. "We have a lifetime of them ahead." Rosie considered this, then nodded sagely. "That's true." She kissed Seth's cheek, then turned to Elena. "Can I call you Mama now? For real?" Elena's eyes stung. "If you want to." "I want to." Rosie threw her arms around Elena's neck. "Good night, Mama." The word broke something in Elena's chest. She held the little girl tight, breathing in her little girl scent, and wondered how she'd gotten so lucky to inherit this bright, brave child. After Rosie was settled, Seth and Elena stood in the kitchen, suddenly alone, suddenly married, suddenly unsure what came next. "I'll take the spare room," Seth said. "You keep the one you've been using." "That's not necessary. This is your house. I can, Elena." Seth's voice was gentle but firm. "We agreed. A marriage in name only. That means separate rooms. I won't have you uncomfortable in your own home." Your own home. The words settled over Elena like a blanket. This was her home now. Not a temporary shelter, not borrowed space. Home. "Thank you," she said quietly. Seth nodded. They stood there another moment, neither quite sure how to end the day, how to transition from single to married, from separate to whatever they were now. Finally, Seth cleared his throat. "Good night, Elena." "Good night." She paused. "Husband." The word hung between them, strange and new. Seth's lips twitched, not quite a smile, but close. "Good night, wife." Elena went to her room and closed the door, leaning against it. She could hear Seth moving around in the spare room, the creak of the bed as he settled in. She looked down at her ring again, at the evidence of the vows she'd made, and tried to process what she'd done. She'd married a man she didn't love. A good man, a kind man, but still a stranger in so many ways. And tomorrow the town would know. Tomorrow she would face the gossip and the judgment as Seth Carver's wife, carrying another man's child, trying to build a life on the foundation of a lie. But as she changed into her nightgown and climbed into bed, Elena felt something she hadn't felt in years. Safe. She felt safe. The next morning, Elena woke to the smell of coffee and found Seth already up making breakfast. It was Sunday, which meant church, which meant facing the town together for the first time as husband and wife. "We don't have to go," Seth said when he saw her face. "We could skip this week. Give people time to adjust." Elena straightened her shoulders. "No. If we don't go, it looks like we're hiding, like we're ashamed." "Are you ashamed?" Elena thought about it. "No, scared, maybe, but not ashamed." Seth's expression was approving. "Then we go. Together." They dressed carefully. Elena in her best dress, Seth in his Sunday suit, Rosie in her yellow dress from yesterday. They looked like a family, Elena thought, as she watched Seth lift Rosie into the wagon. They looked like they belonged together. The church was full when they arrived. Elena felt every eye turned to them as they walked in, felt the weight of speculation and judgment pressing down from all sides. But Seth's hand was solid on her back, guiding her to a pew, and Rosie's small hand clutched hers, and somehow Elena kept her head high. Reverend Blake's sermon was about marriage and commitment and the sanctity of vows. Elena wondered if he had chosen it on purpose, a message for the congregation about accepting what had been done before God. If so, it didn't seem to be working. The whispers started as soon as the service ended. "Awful fast, don't you think? Barely knows the woman." Convenient timing with her showing up pregnant. Seth's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. He just kept his hand on Elena's back and steered them through the crowd toward the wagon. They almost made it. "Seth Carver!" The voice was sharp and female. Elena turned to see a woman bearing down on them, well-dressed, middle-aged, with eyes like chips of ice. Mrs. Brennan, Elena realized, the merchant's wife, the woman whose husband owned Elena's debts, whose men had attacked her. "Mrs. Brennan," Seth's voice was carefully neutral, "I simply had to congratulate you on your marriage." Mrs. Brennan's smile was all teeth. Such a whirlwind romance. Why, it seems like only yesterday that poor Mrs. Ward was living in that pathetic cabin, drowning in her late husband's debts. "Those debts have been settled," Seth said evenly. "I paid them yesterday." Elena's head whipped toward him. "He'd what?" Mrs. Brennan's smile faltered. "I see. How generous of you. It's what family does. Take care of each other." "Family?" Mrs. Brennan's eyes dropped to Elena's stomach, lingering there with deliberate cruelty. "Yes, I can see you're very invested in family." Seth stepped forward, placing himself partially between Elena and Mrs. Brennan. "If you have something to say it plainly." "I wouldn't dream of being indelicate." Mrs. Brennan's voice dripped false sweetness. "I'm simply surprised, that's all. You always seemed so devoted to dear Sarah's memory. I never imagined you'd remarry, especially not to someone so—" She paused delicately. "Complicated." "My wife is not complicated." Seth's voice was steel. "She's brave and kind and exactly what my family needs. If you have a problem with my choices, that's your burden to carry, not mine." "I have no problem at all." Mrs. Brennan's mask slipped slightly, showing the anger beneath. "I simply hope you know what you're taking on. A pregnant widow with nothing to her name. Some might call that charity. Others might call it foolishness." "I call it love," Seth said flatly. "Now, if you'll excuse us, my wife needs to rest." He guided Elena away, Rosie clinging to her other hand. They climbed into the wagon in silence, and Seth drove them home without speaking. But Elena could feel the anger radiating off him in waves. When they reached the ranch, Seth helped Elena and Rosie down, then stood in the yard, staring at the house with his hands clenched at his sides. "You paid my debts," Elena said quietly. "Yes." "Why didn't you tell me?" Seth turned to face her, his gray eyes fierce. "Because I knew you'd argue, knew you'd say you couldn't accept it, that it was too much. But those debts gave men like Garrett Cole power over you. I won't have that. You're my wife now, under my protection, and I protect what's mine." The possessiveness in his voice should have frightened her. Instead, it made her feel something she didn't have a name for, something warm and confusing and entirely too complicated. "How much did it cost?" "Doesn't matter." "Seth, it doesn't matter, Elena." He moved closer. "I had savings. Money I'd been setting aside for years with no real purpose. Now, it has a purpose. It bought you freedom. That's worth every penny." Elena's eyes burned. "I'll pay you back, somehow. When I can—" "No." Seth's voice softened. "This isn't a loan. It's not a debt you owe me. It's what needed to happen. Can you accept that?" Could she? Elena had spent so long being beholden to men, to Thomas, to his creditors, to the endless weight of obligation she hadn't asked for. The thought of owing Seth felt like drowning. But when she looked at his face, she saw no expectation there, no demand for repayment or gratitude, just a simple fact stated plainly. "I'll try," she whispered. "That's all I ask." Rosie tugged on Seth's sleeve. "Papa? Why was that lady being mean to Elena? To Mama?" Seth knelt down, bringing himself to his daughter's eye level. Some people don't understand why grown-ups make the choices they do. They get scared or confused, and sometimes that comes out as meanness. But that's their problem, not ours. We know what's true. We're a family. That's all that matters. "I like being a family," Rosie declared. "I don't care what mean ladies say." Seth smiled and ruffled her hair. "That's my girl." But as the week went on, Elena learned that Mrs. Brennan wasn't the only one with opinions. The ranch received visitors, some genuinely kind, bringing gifts and congratulations, but others clearly there to judge and gossip. Elena met them all with quiet dignity, her hand resting on her stomach, her ring catching the light as she poured coffee and deflected prying questions. It was exhausting. By Friday, Elena was worn thin. She was helping Seth in the barn, feeding chickens while he mended tack, when the nausea hit her hard. She barely made it outside before she was sick, heaving into the dust while her head spun. Seth was beside her instantly, his hand supporting her back. "How long has this been happening?" "It comes and goes." Elena wiped her mouth with a shaking hand. "The doctor said it's normal." "How often?" "Seth, it's fine." "How often, Elena?" She met his eyes and saw real worry there. "Most mornings, sometimes afternoons. It's better than it was." Seth swore under his breath. "You should be resting, not working yourself to exhaustion, entertaining nosy neighbors." "I'm fine." "You're not fine. You're pregnant and exhausted and trying to prove something to people whose opinion doesn't matter." Seth stood, pulling her up with him. "No more visitors unless I'm here. No more working yourself sick. You're resting, even if I have to tie you to a chair." Despite everything, Elena smiled. "You'd tie up your wife?" "If she won't listen to reason, yes." They stood there in the barn doorway, dusty and tired, and something passed between them, an ease, a familiarity that hadn't been there before. They were learning each other, Elena realized. Learning how to be partners in this strange arrangement they'd made. "I should get back to the house," Elena said. "Rosie will be home from the Hendersons soon." Seth nodded, but his hand lingered on her arm. "Elena? Thank you." "For what?" "For trying. I know this isn't easy. I know facing the town, dealing with the gossip, pretending this is all normal. I know it takes a toll. But you're doing it with grace, with dignity, and I'm grateful." Elena's throat tightened. "We're in this together, aren't we? That's what you said, partners." "Yes, we are." She left him in the barn and walked back to the house, her hand pressed to her stomach where the baby grew. She was starting to feel it now. Not kicks yet, but a presence, a weight, a life separate from her own. In a few months, this child would be born. Would look at her with its father's eyes, maybe, or its father's nose. Would be a living reminder of Thomas and everything Elena had endured. But the baby would also be Seth's. By law, by name, by choice. This child would grow up knowing Seth Carver as its father, a man who'd chosen it, who'd given it a home and protection and a future. That had to count for something. That night, Rosie had another nightmare. Elena heard her crying and was up instantly, padding across the floor in her nightgown. She met Seth in the hallway, both of them moving toward the sound of their daughter's distress. Their daughter. When had Elena started thinking of Rosie that way? They comforted her together, Seth on one side of the bed, Elena on the other, singing until Rosie's breathing evened out. When they were sure she was asleep, they crept back into the hallway. "She's having them more often," Seth said quietly. "I thought marriage would help, give her security." "It will. Change is hard, even good change. She just needs time to adjust." Seth nodded, but his face was drawn with worry. "She's been through so much. Lost her mother, dealt with me falling apart, now all this upheaval. Sometimes I wonder if I'm doing right by her." "You're a good father, Seth, the best I've ever seen." He looked at her sharply. "Your father, was drunk more often than not." "And Thomas?" Elena's laugh was bitter. "Thomas would have been a terrible father. He barely wanted children at all, said they were expensive and loud and got in the way." She touched her stomach. "I used to pray I wouldn't get pregnant. Isn't that awful? I was terrified of bringing a child into that house, into that life." Seth's expression was unreadable. "And now? Now I'm still terrified, but for different reasons." Elena met his eyes. "I'm scared I won't be a good mother. Scared I'll mess this up somehow. Scared the baby will sense it's not wanted." "You want this baby." Seth's voice was certain. "I've watched you. The way you touch your stomach when you think no one's looking. The way you talk about the future, about teaching and caring for a child. You want this baby, Elena. Don't doubt that. I want this baby to have what I didn't have, what Thomas couldn't give, safety, kindness, a father who—" She stopped, the words catching. "A father who what?" "A father who'll love it." Elena's voice broke. "Even though it's not yours by blood, even though it came into your life as an obligation. You'll love this baby, won't you? You'll be the father it deserves?" Seth's hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing away a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. "Elena, I've been thinking about this child as mine since the moment I decided to marry you. Blood doesn't make a family, choice does. And I'm choosing this baby. I'm choosing all of you." The words cracked something open in Elena's chest. Before she could think better of it, she stepped forward and wrapped her arms around Seth, burying her face against his chest. For a moment he was still, surprised, and then his arms came around her, holding her carefully, as if she might break. They stood like that in the dark hallway, two broken people trying to build something whole, and Elena let herself believe, just for a moment, that this might actually work. The moment was shattered by pounding on the front door. Seth released her instantly, his body going tense. "Stay here." "Seth!" But he was already moving, grabbing the rifle from above the door as he went. Elena followed despite his order, her heart in her throat. Seth opened the door to find Henry Tucker, their nearest neighbor, disheveled and wild-eyed. "Seth, thank God you're here. It's my boy, Tommy. He was playing near the creek and fell. Hit his head on a rock. He's bleeding bad and won't wake up, and Mary's in hysterics, and the doctor's 20 miles away." "I'll come." Seth turned to Elena. "Lock the door behind me. Don't open it for anyone but me." "Take the wagon," Elena said. "You'll need it to bring the boy back." Seth hesitated, clearly torn between helping and leaving her alone. Elena made the decision for him. "Go. They need you. We'll be fine." Seth grabbed his coat and was out the door in seconds, Henry Tucker running alongside him toward the barn. Elena watched them hitch up the wagon in record time and disappear into the darkness. Then she locked the door and leaned against it, her heart pounding. She checked on Rosie, still sleeping, thank God, then returned to the kitchen. She put water on to boil, gathered clean cloths, found the whiskey Seth kept for medical emergencies. If they brought the boy back here, they'd need supplies ready. She was right. An hour later, the wagon rolled into the yard. Seth carried a small, limp form into the house, the boy's mother right behind him, sobbing. Elena had the table cleared and ready, the lamp bright overhead. "Put him here," she directed, her voice steady despite her racing heart. Seth laid the boy down gently. He was maybe 8 years old, pale as death, blood matting his hair. But he was breathing. That was something. "Mary, I need you to help me," Elena said firmly, catching the hysterical woman's hands. "Your son needs you calm and focused. Can you do that?" Mary Tucker nodded, gulping back sobs. Together, they cleaned the wound. It was deep but clean, and the boy stirred when Elena pressed the cloth to it, which she took as a good sign. Seth held him steady while Elena stitched, something her mother had taught her years ago, a skill she'd hoped never to use again. By the time she tied off the last stitch, dawn was breaking. The boy, Tommy, was awake, groggy and in pain, but alive. Mary was crying again, but with relief this time. "Thank you," she kept saying. "Thank you. Thank you." Seth helped Henry load his family back into their wagon, promising to check on Tommy tomorrow. When they were gone, he came back inside to find Elena scrubbing blood from the table, her hands shaking now that the crisis was over. "That was well done," Seth said quietly. "My mother was a midwife. She taught me basic doctoring." Elena's voice was distant. "I haven't done that in years." Seth took the cloth from her hands and set it aside. "You probably saved that boy's life. Or I just delayed the inevitable. Head wounds are unpredictable." "Elena." Seth turned her to face him. "You did good. Don't diminish that." Elena looked up at him, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline was fading, leaving her hollow and shaky. "I'm tired, Seth." "I know. Come on." He guided her toward her room, his hand steady on her back. "You need rest." At her door, Elena paused. "Will you be all right? You were up all night, too." "I'll manage. I'm used to short nights." Elena nodded, but she didn't want to be alone. Didn't want to lie in the dark, thinking about blood and head wounds and all the ways life could go wrong in an instant. But she couldn't ask Seth to stay. That wasn't what they were. As if reading her mind, Seth said softly, "I'll be right next door if you need anything. Just call." It wasn't what she wanted, but it was what she had. "Thank you." She closed the door and climbed into bed, still in her blood-stained dress, too tired to change. She pressed her hand to her stomach, feeling the small life there, and sent up a wordless prayer to a God she wasn't sure was listening. "Keep us safe. Keep this family safe. Let this impossible thing we're building somehow survive." Outside her door, she heard Seth moving in his room, settling in for what was left of the night. And for the first time since marrying him, Elena let herself imagine what it might be like if this marriage was real. If Seth came to her room instead of his own, if he held her through the dark hours, if the vows they'd made were born of love instead of necessity. But that was fantasy, and Elena had learned long ago that fantasies were dangerous things. She closed her eyes and forced herself to sleep, alone in her marriage bed, her hand still pressed protectively over her growing child. The incident with Tommy Tucker changed something in the town's perception of Elena. Word spread quickly about how Seth Carver's new wife had stitched up the boy with steady hands, how she'd stayed calm while his mother fell apart, how she'd probably saved his life. When Elena went into town the following week, people nodded to her with something approaching respect. Mrs. Henderson even stopped her wagon to say thank you, though Elena hadn't been the one who'd helped her family. "It's good to have someone with medical knowledge in these parts," the older woman said. "Dr. Morrison's getting on in years, and he can't be everywhere at once." Elena accepted the gratitude with quiet grace, but inside she felt like a fraud. She'd done what anyone would do in an emergency. Nothing more, nothing less. Still, the shift was undeniable. People who'd whispered about her pregnancy now spoke to her directly. Doors that had been closed opened a crack. It wasn't full acceptance. Not yet, maybe not ever. But it was something. The weeks passed in a rhythm that felt almost normal. Elena's body changed, her stomach rounding visibly now, impossible to hide. She made new dresses with fabric Seth bought without comment, letting out seams and adjusting waistlines. Rosie was fascinated by the changes, always wanting to touch Elena's belly, asking endless questions about babies and birth and whether the baby could hear her when she talked. "Of course it can hear you," Elena said one afternoon as they shelled peas together on the porch. "That's why you should talk to it. Tell it stories, sing songs. Let it know it's loved before it even arrives." Rosie pressed her ear to Elena's stomach, speaking directly to the baby.
Hello in there. I'm your sister Rosie. I can't wait to meet you. Mama says you're going to be wonderful. Elena's throat tightened at the casual way Rosie said Mama, now, as if Elena had always been hers.
The little girl had fully embraced their new family structure, talking endlessly about when the baby comes and after the baby's born, as if the future was certain and bright. If only Elena felt the same certainty. She and Seth had settled into a careful partnership. They worked side by side during the day, him on the ranch, her in the house and garden, and came together for meals and Rosie's bedtime. They were polite, considerate, careful not to overstep the boundaries they'd drawn. But there was a tension underneath it all, a current Elena couldn't quite name. She'd catch Seth watching her sometimes, his expression unreadable. Or she'd find herself listening for his footsteps at night, wondering if he was as awake and restless as she was. It was a half-life, Elena thought, a marriage without intimacy, a partnership without passion, safe but hollow. She told herself it was enough. It had to be. Then came the day Garrett Cole rode into the yard. Elena was hanging laundry when she saw him, alone this time, no brothers to back him up. Her blood went cold. Seth was in the far pasture, too far to call. Rosie was inside napping. Elena was alone. Garrett dismounted slowly, deliberately, his eyes never leaving Elena's face. The bruises Seth had given him were long healed, but there was something in his expression that made Elena's skin crawl. Rage, humiliation, the look of a man who'd been bested and hadn't forgotten. "Mrs. Carver," his voice dripped mockery. "Or should I still call you Mrs. Ward? That's who you really are, ain't it? Thomas Ward's widow, wearing another man's name like a costume." Elena's hand moved to the knife she kept in her apron pocket, a habit she'd developed after the first attack. "You need to leave. My husband will be back soon." "Your husband?" Garrett laughed. "That's rich. You've got him fooled, don't you? Got him playing father to another man's bastard. Wonder what he'd think if he knew what Thomas used to say about you in the saloon." Elena's stomach turned. "I don't care what Thomas said." "You should. He had some real colorful stories about how you couldn't give him a living child, about how you were cold as ice in bed, about how he had to go to the brothel in town just to remember what a real woman felt like." Garrett stepped closer. "Makes a man wonder why Seth Carver bothered, unless he's getting something out of the arrangement too. Unless you've learned some new tricks to keep a man interested." "Get off my property!" Elena's voice was steel, but her hand shook on the knife. "Your property." Garrett's eyes dropped to her rounded stomach. "That's funny. 6 months ago you were begging for scraps. Now you're playing Lady of the Manor. Must be nice trapping a lonely widower with a convenient pregnancy." "I didn't trap anyone." "No?" Garrett was close now, close enough that Elena could smell the whiskey on his breath. "So Carver just happened to marry you out of the goodness of his heart? He just happened to take on another man's debts and another man's child? Nobody's that noble, sweetheart. He's getting something. Question is, what?" Before Elena could react, Garrett's hand shot out and grabbed her wrist, yanking her close. "Maybe I should find out for myself, see what's so special about you that it's worth all this trouble." Elena drove her knee up hard, aiming for his groin. Garrett twisted at the last second, and she caught his thigh instead. Not enough to disable him, but enough to make him curse and loosen his grip. Elena wrenched free and ran for the house, but Garrett was faster. He caught her on the porch steps, his hand tangling in her hair, pulling her back. "You think you can fight me?" His breath was hot against her ear. "You think?" The rifle shot cracked across the prairie like thunder. Garrett froze. So did Elena. They both turned to see Seth standing 50 feet away, his rifle aimed steady at Garrett's head. His face was a mask of cold fury that made Garrett's earlier rage look like a child's tantrum. "Let her go." Seth's voice was flat, emotionless. "Now." Garrett's hands released Elena immediately. She stumbled forward, catching herself on the porch railing, her heart hammering. "I wasn't doing nothing," Garrett said, his bravado crumbling. "Just came to talk. You put your hands on my wife." Seth stepped closer, the rifle never wavering. "You threatened her. On my land. In front of my house." "It was a misunderstanding." "No misunderstanding." Seth was close enough now that Elena could see the rage in his eyes, barely leashed. "You came here looking for trouble. Now you've found it. Garrett's hand moved toward his gun. Do it, Seth said softly. Give me a reason. The threat was clear. Seth wanted Garrett to draw, wanted an excuse to pull that trigger. The realization must have shown on Garrett's face because his hand moved slowly away from his weapon. This ain't over, Carver. Yes, it is. Seth's voice was ice. You come near my wife again, you even look at her wrong in town, and I will kill you, not arrest you, not report you, kill you. Am I clear? Garrett swallowed hard. You can't threaten me. The law ain't here. Just you and me and this rifle. And I'm betting you can't outdraw a bullet already pointed at your head. Seth's finger moved to the trigger. Want to test that theory? Garrett backed toward his horse, his hands up. You're crazy. No, I'm a man protecting his family. Now get off my land before I change my mind about letting you leave alive. Garrett mounted in a scramble and rode hard, not looking back. Seth held his position until the man was a speck on the horizon, then finally lowered the rifle. His hands were shaking. Elena came down the steps on trembling legs. Seth! He turned to her, and the rage drained from his face, replaced by something that looked like fear. Did he hurt you? Did he? No, I'm fine. You got here in time. Seth closed the distance between them in 3 strides, the rifle clattering to the porch as he pulled Elena into his arms. His whole body was shaking now, adrenaline and fury and terror all bleeding through his careful control. I saw him grab you, Seth said roughly against her hair. I was riding back and I saw him grab you, and I... Christ, Elena, if I'd been 30 seconds later... But you weren't. Elena's arms came around him, holding him as tightly as he held her. You were here. I'm safe. They stood like that for a long time, 2 people clinging to each other in the aftermath of violence. Elena could feel Seth's heart hammering against her chest, could feel the tremor in his hands where they pressed against her back. This was more than anger, she realized. More than protectiveness. This was fear, raw, visceral fear of losing her. When Seth finally pulled back, his eyes searched her face. I should have killed him. No. Elena, he'll come back. Men like that, they don't stop. They just wait for another opportunity. Then we'll deal with it when it happens, together. Elena cupped his face, feeling the rough stubble under her palms. I won't let him make you into a killer. You're better than that. I don't feel better. Seth's voice was raw. I feel like I could ride after him right now and put a bullet in his head and sleep just fine afterward. But you won't, because that's not who you are. Seth's jaw clenched. You don't know who I am. Not really. I know you're a man who keeps his promises, who protects people weaker than himself, who built this marriage on honor even when it would have been easier to walk away. Elena's hands dropped to his chest, feeling his heart still racing. That's who you are, Seth Carver. Don't let Garrett Cole change that. Seth stared at her for a long moment, something shifting in his expression. Then, before Elena could process what was happening, his mouth was on hers. This wasn't the chaste kiss from their wedding. This was desperate, fierce, full of all the emotion they'd been carefully suppressing for weeks. Seth's hands came up to cradle her face, angling her head, deepening the kiss. Elena gasped against his mouth, and he took advantage, his tongue sliding against hers in a way that made her knees weak. She should stop this, should pull away. This wasn't part of their agreement, but her body had other ideas. Her hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer, and she kissed him back with a hunger she didn't know she possessed. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Seth's eyes were wide with shock. At himself, at her, at what they'd just done. I'm sorry, he said roughly. I shouldn't have... Don't! Elena pressed her fingers to his lips. Don't apologize. But we agreed. I know what we agreed. Elena's voice was shaky. And maybe we need to revisit that agreement. Seth went very still. What are you saying? Elena wasn't sure herself. All she knew was that standing here in Seth's arms, her lips still tingling from his kiss, pretending this was just a practical arrangement felt like the biggest lie she'd ever told. I'm saying maybe we've been lying to ourselves, she whispered. Maybe this is more than convenience. Maybe it's been more for a while now. Elena, Seth's voice was strained. You don't have to. I don't expect... What if I want to?
The words came out before she could stop them. What if I'm tired of separate rooms and careful distance? What if I want this marriage to be real? Seth's hands trembled on her face. You don't know what you're saying. You're shaken up from Garrett, and I'm clear-headed enough to know that when you kissed me just now, I didn't want you to stop. Elena held his gaze. I'm clear-headed enough to know that I think about you at night. Wonder if you're awake too. Wonder what it would be like if you came to my room instead of yours. Christ, Elena. Seth's forehead dropped to hers, his eyes closed. I think about it too. Every night. I lie there knowing you're just down the hall, and He stopped, swallowing hard. Then why don't you? Because I gave you my word. Because this was supposed to be safe for you. Because I won't take advantage. It's not taking advantage if I'm asking. Elena's hand slid up to his neck. Seth, I'm asking. He pulled back just enough to see her face, searching for any hint of doubt or obligation. Whatever he saw there must have satisfied him because his next kiss was softer, slower, but no less intense. His hands moved from her face to her waist, careful of her rounded stomach, pulling her as close as the baby between them would allow. They might have stayed like that forever if Rosie's voice hadn't called from inside. Mama, Papa, I'm hungry. Reality crashed back. They broke apart, both flushed, both breathing hard. Seth's eyes were dark with want, but he stepped back, putting distance between them. We should talk about this, he said roughly. Really talk. Not just, tonight, Elena interrupted. After Rosie's asleep. We'll talk. Seth nodded, not trusting his voice. He picked up his rifle and went to tend his horse, needing space to clear his head. Elena watched him go, her hand pressed to her lips, her heart still racing. What had she just done? She'd opened a door that couldn't be closed, changed the nature of their agreement, admitted feelings she'd been trying desperately to deny, and she didn't regret it, not for a second. That evening passed in a strange tension. They were polite at dinner, careful not to touch, hyper-aware of each other in a way they hadn't been before. Rosie chattered obliviously, not noticing the undercurrent flowing between her parents. When bedtime came, Seth read Rosie a story while Elena cleaned the kitchen. When he emerged, he found her at the window, staring out at the darkening prairie. She's asleep, he said quietly. Elena turned. Good. They stared at each other across the kitchen, neither quite sure how to begin. Finally, Seth spoke. I need you to be sure about this, not just caught up in fear or gratitude or, I'm sure. Elena moved closer. Seth, I've been married before. I know the difference between obligation and want. And I want this. I want you. Even though this isn't what we agreed to, agreements can change. People can change. Elena stopped in front of him, tilting her head back to meet his eyes. When we got married, I thought I was incapable of feeling anything for a man ever again. Thomas killed that part of me, or so I believed. But you've brought it back to life, slowly, carefully, without even trying. And I'm tired of fighting it. Seth's hand came up to cup her cheek. I never stopped wanting this to be real. From the first moment I saw you, something in me recognized you, like I'd been waiting for you without knowing it. His thumb brushed her lower lip. But I was trying to be honorable, trying to give you the choice without pressure. I choose you, Elena said simply. Not because I have to, because I want to. The kiss this time was inevitable. Seth pulled her close, one hand tangled in her hair, the other careful on her waist. Elena melted into him, all the distance they'd maintained dissolving like morning mist. When he pulled back, his eyes were dark with promise. Are you sure? He asked one more time. More sure than I've been of anything in years. Seth took her hand and led her to his room, the one he'd been sleeping in since the wedding, the one that used to be his and Sarah's, but had become just his after she died. Elena had never been inside it before. It was spare and neat, the bed carefully made, few personal touches. A room for sleeping, not living. But tonight it would be different. Seth lit the lamp, casting the room in warm, golden light. Then he turned to Elena, his hands gentle as he began unpinning her hair. The dark waves fell around her shoulders, and Seth ran his fingers through them with something like reverence. You're so beautiful, he murmured. I've wanted to do this for so long. Elena's hands found the buttons of his shirt, working them open with trembling fingers. Then why did you wait? Because I'm a fool who thought honor mattered more than happiness. Seth's breath hitched as her hands found bare skin. I was wrong. They undressed each other slowly, carefully, both hyper-aware of the baby between them. When Elena stood in nothing but her shift, self-conscious of her changed body, Seth's eyes held nothing but wonder.
Perfect, he said, his hands tracing the curve of her stomach. You're perfect. Elena started to protest. She was tired and swollen and marked by pregnancy, but Seth kissed the words away. He guided her to the bed, laying her down with infinite care, then stretched out beside her. I've never done this with a pregnant woman, he admitted. You'll have to tell me if anything— Seth, Elena pulled him down to her. Stop thinking and just kiss me. He did, and as their bodies came together, careful and slow and achingly tender, Elena felt the last walls around her heart crumble. This wasn't obligation or convenience or practical arrangement. This was real. This was love, even if neither of them had said the word yet. Afterward, they lay tangled together, Seth's hand resting on Elena's stomach where the baby kicked lazily. Does it hurt? He asked. When it moves like that? No, it's strange, but not painful, like butterflies or bubbles. Elena covered his hand with hers. This baby will know you as its father, the only father it ever has. Does that scare you? Terrifies me, Seth admitted. But not because it's not mine by blood, because I want to do right by it, by all of you. And I'm scared I'll fail. You won't. Elena turned in his arms, facing him. You're the best man I've ever known, Seth Carver. This baby is lucky to have you. We all are. Seth's eyes were suspiciously bright. I don't deserve you. You saved me. Multiple times. I think that earns you some credit. I didn't save you. You saved yourself. I just gave you a safe place to land. Elena kissed him softly. Then thank you for being my safe place. They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, the baby moving between them. And for the first time since Thomas died, Elena slept through the night without nightmares. The months that followed were the happiest of Elena's life. She and Seth moved into a rhythm that was both partnership and romance, working together during the day, coming together at night, building a family that felt more real than anything Elena had experienced before. The town's acceptance grew, especially after Elena helped deliver Mrs. Henderson's baby during a difficult birth. Dr. Morrison had been delayed by a storm, and Elena had stepped in, drawing on her mother's teachings and her own instincts. Mother and baby survived, and the story spread like wildfire. Seth Carver's wife wasn't just respectable. She was valuable to the community. Still, there were holdouts. Mrs. Brennan remained coldly polite. Garrett Cole and his brothers gave them wide berth, but the hatred in Garrett's eyes whenever they crossed paths was palpable. Seth remained vigilant, never leaving Elena alone in town, always watching for trouble. As Elena's pregnancy progressed into its final months, Seth became increasingly protective. He wouldn't let her lift anything heavy, insisted she rest every afternoon, hovered constantly until Elena threatened to lock him in the barn if he didn't give her space to breathe. I'm pregnant, not dying, she said one afternoon when he tried to stop her from hanging laundry. You could go into labor any time now. The doctor said I have at least 2 weeks, maybe 3. I'm not made of glass, Seth. I know, but He stopped, his jaw working. I couldn't bear it if something happened to you. Elena's irritation melted. She took his face in her hands, making him look at her. Nothing's going to happen to me. Women have been having babies since the beginning of time. I'm strong. The baby's strong. We're going to be fine. Sarah said that too, right before Seth's voice broke. Understanding flooded through Elena. I'm not Sarah, and this isn't the same situation. She was sick for years before the end. I'm healthy. This pregnancy has been normal. There's no reason to think there's never a reason until suddenly there is. Seth pulled her close, his arms tight around her. I can't lose you. I can't. Not when I've just found you. You won't, Elena promised, even though she knew it was a promise she couldn't guarantee. But you have to let me live, Seth. You have to trust that everything will work out. He nodded against her hair, but Elena felt the fear radiating off him. It stayed with him through the following weeks, manifesting in small ways, checking on her constantly, waking in the night to make sure she was still breathing, refusing to leave the ranch for more than an hour at a time. Elena bore it with patience, understanding the trauma driving his behavior. But as her due date approached, she became increasingly worried about how he would handle the actual birth. Her concerns proved justified when her water broke 3 weeks later during a violent thunderstorm. Elena was in the kitchen making bread when she felt the gush of fluid, followed immediately by a cramping pain that took her breath away. She gripped the counter, breathing through it, then called for Seth. He appeared instantly, took one look at her face, and went pale. "It's time." "It's time," Elena confirmed. "We need to get Dr. Morrison. I'll ride to town." "Seth." Elena caught his arm as another contraction hit. "Look outside. You can't ride in this. The roads will be impassable. We're on our own." Seth looked out the window at the sheeting rain, the lightning splitting the sky, and Elena saw panic flash across his face. "I can't. Elena, I don't know how to—" "You're going to have to learn." Elena forced herself to sound calm even as pain ripped through her. "Get Rosie to the Hendersons, then come back and help me. I can't leave you." "You can, and you will. Rosie doesn't need to see this. Go, quickly." Seth moved like a man in a dream, bundling a confused and frightened Rosie into her coat, carrying her through the rain to saddle a horse. Elena heard him ride out and prayed he'd make it to the Henderson ranch safely. While he was gone, Elena focused on breathing, on moving, on preparing. She gathered towels, boiled water, found the birthing supplies she'd set aside weeks ago. The contractions were coming faster now, harder, stealing her breath and making her legs shake. Seth returned soaked to the skin, his eyes wild. "Henderson said he'd keep Rosie as long as needed. What do you need me to do?" "Help me to the bed." He did, his hands gentle despite his panic. Elena could feel the baby moving lower, pressure building, and she knew it wouldn't be long. First babies were supposed to take hours, sometimes days, but this baby had other ideas. "Seth?" She gripped his hand as another contraction hit. "I need you to stay calm. Can you do that?" "I don't know." "You have to. I need you strong right now. Can you be strong for me?" Seth took a shuddering breath, and Elena saw him pull himself together through sheer force of will. "Yes. Tell me what to do." She did, walking him through the process as much as she could between contractions. But as the pain intensified, as the urge to push became overwhelming, Elena lost the ability to give instructions. She could only grip Seth's hand and bear down, her world narrowing to the singular focus of bringing this child into the world. "I can see the head," Seth said, his voice tight. "Elena, I can see—" One more push. One more impossible, agonizing push, and suddenly the pressure released. A thin wail split the air, high and indignant, and Elena collapsed back against the pillows, gasping. "It's a girl," Seth said, his voice full of wonder. "A beautiful baby girl." He wrapped the baby in a clean towel, his hands surprisingly steady, then placed her on Elena's chest. Elena looked down at her daughter, red-faced and wrinkled and perfect, and felt her heart crack open with a love so fierce it was almost painful. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "Welcome home." The baby's eyes opened, dark and unfocused, and Elena traced her tiny features with a trembling finger. She didn't look like Thomas. Thank God she didn't look like Thomas. She looked like herself, brand new and unmarked by the past. Seth sat on the edge of the bed, his hand covering both Elena and the baby, his face wet with tears he didn't bother hiding. "She's perfect. You're both perfect." "Faith," Elena said. "Her name is Faith." "Faith Carver." Seth tested the name, then nodded. "It's perfect. She's perfect." He stayed with them through the night, cleaning up, bringing water, tending to both Elena and the baby, with a gentleness that made Elena fall even more deeply in love with him. This man who'd been terrified of this moment had risen to it, had brought their daughter safely into the world with his own hands. By morning, the storm had passed. The sun rose over the prairie, turning everything gold and new. Seth went to fetch Rosie from the Hendersons, and when the little girl burst into the room and saw her baby sister, her face lit up like Christmas. She's so tiny, Rosie breathed, touching Faith's hand with one careful finger. Can I hold her? Of course. Elena helped Rosie settle on the bed, then placed Faith carefully in her arms. This is your sister, Faith. Rosie looked down at the baby with an expression of pure devotion. I'll protect you, she promised seriously, and teach you things, and make sure nobody's ever mean to you. Seth's arm came around Elena's shoulders, pulling her close as they watched their daughters together. We did good, he said softly. We did, Elena agreed. The weeks after Faith's birth passed in a blur of sleepless nights and endless feedings. Elena was exhausted, but happy in a way she'd never been before. Her body ached, her breasts were sore, and she was pretty sure she hadn't slept more than 2 hours at a stretch since giving birth. But when she looked at Faith, at her daughter, her miracle, none of it mattered. Seth was a revelation as a father. He walked Faith when she cried at night, changed her diapers without complaint, sang to her in his rough, off-key voice. He was patient with Rosie's jealousy and excitement in turns, making sure the older girl felt included while also protecting Elena's need to bond with the baby. One evening, about a month after Faith was born, Elena found Seth in the rocking chair by the window, Faith asleep on his chest. He was humming something low and sweet, his large hand covering most of the baby's back. You're good at this, Elena said softly. Seth looked up, smiling. She makes it easy. So calm, so trusting. His hand moved in gentle circles. I keep thinking about what you said, about choice making a family. You were right. I chose her before she was born. But now I love her like she's my blood. I can't imagine life without her. Elena's eyes burned. She's lucky to have you. I'm the lucky one. Seth's voice was rough with emotion. I got a second chance. At family, at love, at life. Most people don't get that. Elena crossed to him, settling on the arm of the chair. I got a second chance too. We both did. They sat like that as the sun set, watching their daughter sleep, and Elena felt a peace she'd never known. This was what home felt like. Not a place, but people. People who chose each other, who fought for each other, who built something beautiful out of broken pieces. Spring came to the Kansas prairie, bringing green grass and wildflowers and a warmth that seeped into bones that had been cold too long. Faith was 3 months old now, growing fat and happy. Rosie had started school in town and came home every day bursting with stories. And the town had finally, fully accepted them. Elena Carver was one of them now, a respected member of the community, a skilled healer, a good mother. The gossip had died down to occasional whispers easily ignored. Even Garrett Cole had left them alone, chastened by Seth's threat and his own cowardice. One Sunday afternoon, Seth found Elena in the garden, Faith strapped to her chest in a sling while she planted vegetables. Rosie was nearby, playing with a stick and humming to herself. Remember when you first came here? Seth asked, settling beside her in the dirt. You were so thin, so scared. You could barely look at me. I remember. Elena pressed a seed into the soil. I thought you were going to turn out like every other man I'd known, dangerous or disappointing or both. And now? Elena looked at him, at this man who'd saved her, married her, loved her baby as his own, given her a life she'd never dreamed possible. Now I know I was wrong. You're neither dangerous nor disappointing. You're home. Seth's eyes went soft. I love you. I don't think I've said that properly, but I do. I love you, Elena Carver. I love you too. The words came easily, true and simple. I think I have for a while now. I was just too scared to admit it. Seth pulled her close, careful of the baby between them, and kissed her with all the tenderness and passion of a man who'd found his heart's home. Faith squirmed between them, making a small sound of protest, and they both laughed. She's going to be bossy, Seth predicted, like her mother. I'm not bossy. I'm assertive. You're bossy, and I love it. They sat in the garden together, dirt under their fingernails, the baby between them, Rosie's laughter floating on the wind. The prairie stretched out around them, vast and open and full of possibility. Somewhere out there were people who still judged them, still whispered about the pregnant widow and the lonely widower who'd built a family on desperation and hope. But here, in this garden, under this wide Kansas sky, none of that mattered. Here, they were simply a family. Seth, Elena, Rosie, and Faith. 4 people who'd been broken by life and had chosen to heal together. The town could whisper all it wanted. The gossips could speculate about timelines and bloodlines and the propriety of it all. Because at the end of the day, when Seth carried a sleepy Rosie to bed and Elena fed Faith in the rocking chair by the window, when they all came together in the golden evening light and simply existed in each other's presence, that was truth. That was real. That was love. And no amount of debt or judgment or painful past could take that away. Elena had been owed nothing when she came here. No kindness, no mercy, no second chance. But Seth had given them anyway, freely and without condition. And in return, Elena had given him what she'd thought she'd lost forever. Her heart, her trust, her hope. The debt was paid in full, not with money or obligation, but with choice, with commitment, with the quiet daily work of building a life together. As the sun set over the prairie and Seth came to sit beside her, taking Faith so Elena could rest her tired arms, she looked at the ring on her finger, Sarah's ring, now hers, a symbol of continuation rather than replacement. And she knew, with absolute certainty, that she was exactly where she was supposed to be. Home. Finally, impossibly, wonderfully home. Under the wide Kansas sky, the Carver family settled in for another evening. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, a ranch to run, children to raise, a community to navigate. But tonight, they had each other. And that, Elena had learned, was more than enough. It was everything.